Chapter 1008. The conditions to become a consecrator. Longao definitely didn't know the conditions to become a consecrator of the sword sect, but he knew that with his current strength, it was impossible for him to become a consecrator of the sword sect. There was no doubt about that. What does it have to do with me? Black Wolf's answer seemed to be out of everyone's expectations. The 5 of them were instantly enraged. Xiao Yuan, teach him a lesson. Let Black Wolf know the consequences of being arrogant. If it was any other cultivation technique, would the 5 of them still dare to do so? As the saying goes, a kind horse will be ridden by people, and a kind man will be bullied by people. This was an eternal truth. The young man called Xiao Yuan was a green-grade great emperor. He was the weakest among the 5 of them. The other 4's intention was simple. They wanted to use Xiao Yuan to test the truth of Black Wolf, to see if he was as powerful as the rumors said. The 5 of them knew clearly how powerful Kim Roman was. Kim Roman was invincible among the green-grade great emperors, but even so, Black Wolf defeated Kim Roman with just one move. Black Wolf's cultivation technique. Please enlighten me. Enlighten me? Enlighten your ass. Black Wolf knew what the 5 of them were thinking. He despised them in his heart. He would definitely be hindered when he entered the sword sect and became a consecrator of the sword sect. However, Longao never thought that trouble would come so quickly. End the battle quickly. Longao knew that if he didn't solve these problems quickly, they would continue to come. If it was in the past, it would be difficult to deal with a green-grade great emperor with his current strength. But now, Longao had entered a state of enlightenment in the sword Dao and was able to produce sword qi. His understanding of the sword Dao had skyrocketed. In other words, he was more than capable of fighting a green-grade great emperor now. It was impossible for a green-grade great emperor to fight against a green-grade great emperor and kill him. Under normal circumstances, it was difficult to make up for the difference in cultivation level. Consecrated Black Wolf. Consecrate your sister. Longao did not want to waste any more time. He took a big stride forward. Before he arrived, he used his finger as a sword and a terrifying sword qi instantly shot out. Longao could defeat Kim Roman in one move, let alone Xiao Yuan. However, Xiao Yuan's strength was far from reaching Kim Roman's level. The result was obvious. Before Lil Yuan could react, his entire body had already flown out fiercely, and he spat out blood. If Longao had not shown mercy, Lil Yuan would have died with just this move alone. However, Longao didn't kill him. No matter what, this was the sword sect. If you want to beat a dog, you have to look at its owner. Seeing Xiao Yuan defeated in one move, the remaining 4 were shocked. As expected, the rumor was true. Black Wolf could defeat a green-grade great emperor in one move. The 4 immediately helped Xiao Yuan up from the ground and looked coldly at Black Wolf. To be able to defeat Xiao Yuan in one move, his strength was needless to say. You'd better not provoke me again. Otherwise, I won't be merciful next time. I'll turn you into a ghost. Longao turned around and left. Until his figure disappeared completely, the 5 of them didn't continue to attack. Although there were blue-grade great emperors among the remaining 4, none of them dared to attack. Black Wolf was able to defeat Xiao Yuan in one move. Moreover, the rumor was true. If they were unlucky and the opponent's strength was really that strong, not to mention their lives, where would their reputation be? Longao, we're almost there. According to Xiling's senses, Longao arrived at the back mountain of the sword sect. It was a very secluded place. Just as he stepped into this place, Longao's expression changed. This was because he could feel several terrifying auras surrounding him the moment he stepped in. Supreme Dao martial artists. Longao already knew how terrifying the place Xiling came to was. Not daring to continue, Longao slowly retreated until all the auras disappeared from his body. Longao then let out a long sigh of relief. Now that he thought about it, he was a little scared. Longao knew very well that although he had some friendship with Murong Guena, he would be killed by these Supreme Dao martial artists of the sword sect if he wasn't careful when he came to the forbidden area of the sword sect for no reason. Xiling, are you trying to kill me? Whether it was entering the Martial Artists Alliance or the Sword Sect, The two Genling didn't dare to come out. After all, the sword sect was full of experts. Even if there were Nirvana realm martial artists, there were still more than one or two Nirvana realm martial artists. If the two Genling were discovered, the result would be obvious. Young Master Long, sister didn't mean it that way. It's just that this power is too important for us. Sister is just a little impatient. He nodded. Longao wasn't an unreasonable person. He could understand what the two Genling were thinking. If he were in their shoes, he would probably be as anxious as them. However, Longao didn't act recklessly. There were many Supreme Dao martial artists around. It wouldn't be worth it if he was killed by them. What should he do? It would be best if he could sneak in quietly. Unless it was absolutely necessary, Longao didn't want to make things too awkward with the sword sect. After all, he came to the sword sect to challenge the experts of sword Dao. He wanted to verify his sword Dao cultivation and break through his current realm. Longao, we're counting on you this time. You've helped us and we'll repay you in the future. Don't say that. I just want to know what I should do next. Longao gradually realized that Xiling wasn't as annoying as he thought. He didn't know why, but he felt that Xiling was different at this moment. If it were in the past, Xiling would have already killed him. Longao, my sister, and I can't take action. There are too many experts here. So, what you need to do next is to find a way to divert the attention of these Supreme Dao martial artists. Then, follow my senses into the forbidden area. At that time, I have a way to avoid their aura detection. You'll be safe. Without waiting for Longao to speak, Xiling continued, the forbidden area of the sword sect is also very beneficial for you. I can guarantee that this time, I'll help you break through at least one level. Break through at least one level? Hearing Xiling's words, Longao would be lying if he said that he wasn't excited. After all, he knew very well what it meant to break through at least one level. One should know that his current cultivation was at the green grade Great Emperor realm. If he could break through to the next level, he would be a cyan grade Great Emperor realm expert. If that was the case, he could even fight against a blue grade Great Emperor realm expert. But Longao was also somewhat solemn. Wanting to divert the attention of all the Supreme Dao martial artists was also not an easy matter. It was still those words, if they were to relax a little in this matter, they would fall into a situation of eternal damnation. Chapter 1009. Longao did not act rashly. After all, there were dozens of Supreme Dao warriors around. Dragon Sect's forbidden area. Under normal circumstances, no disciple would come here. It was quiet all around. Longao stood quietly under the big tree. In his mind, he was thinking of various ways to lure these Supreme Dao warriors away. Corpse Slave. In the end, Longao chose to use the Corpse Slave. Under Longao's control, the Great Emperor-level Corpse Slave took a big stride and rushed out. The result of a small Corpse Slave could be imagined. The Corpse Slave did not attract the attention of all the Supreme Dao warriors. In just a short second, the Corpse Slave had been torn into pieces and disappeared without a trace. *CK Longao cursed in his heart. Although he had already guessed this result, he still felt a little uncomfortable. Even the Corpse Slave could not successfully lure the Supreme Dao warriors away. Was there any other way? Young Master Long, sister will lure these Supreme Dao warriors away. Get ready and follow my senses. Hearing Bai Ling's words, Longao was shocked. Longao knew very well that there were many experts in the sword sect. If these experts knew that there were two Genling, whether it was Xiling or Bai Ling, it would be very dangerous. Bai Ling, Xiling, if you are discovered by the experts in the sword sect, you will be in trouble. He seemed to have already guessed this. Xiling said, Longao, you don't have to worry about this. As long as you are fast enough, I won't be discovered. Since the words had already come to this, Longao was very clear that he could only do so. Before Longao could continue to ask, a purple figure appeared. With a swoosh, Xiling had already rushed out. As expected. As Xiling said, all the Supreme Dao warriors around were shocked when they sensed Xiling's existence. One by one, they chased after him. They were delighted. Young Master Long, come with me. Nodding his head, Longao didn't dare to hesitate. He knew very well that the faster he moved, the safer Xiling would be, and the less likely they would be discovered. That was indeed the case. Longao used spatial teleportation and his body instantly disappeared from the spot. After a few teleportations, Longao arrived in front of a towering tree. He was very curious. Could it be that the Forbidden Land was right in front of him? Bai Ling, where is the entrance to the Forbidden Area? All right. Hearing Bai Ling's words, Longao saw a spatial stone door appear in front of him. It seemed that Bai Ling had opened it. In the next second, Xiling suddenly appeared and said anxiously, "Hurry up and go in." Naturally, Longao knew what was going on. He did not dare to be careless. Turning around, he disappeared into the spatial gate. Just as Longao's body disappeared, dozens of Supreme Dao martial artists suddenly appeared. They looked at each other. Until now, the dozens of Supreme Dao martial artists still didn't know what was going on. That person was obviously not from the sword sect. Who could it be? No matter who it is, we only have one mission. Guard this place and don't let anyone enter the Forbidden Area. That's right. The dozens of people didn't expect that in the short time they had left, someone had quietly entered the Forbidden Area. If the dozens of people knew about this, what would they think? If it was an ordinary person, it would be impossible for them to enter the Forbidden Area in such a short time. However, Longao's situation was completely different. With spatial teleportation, Longao's speed was something that even titled Great Emperors couldn't compare to. The spatial gate flashed with white light, and Longao successfully entered a small valley. The mysterious valley was shrouded in black fog, and there was a very strange power. Longao was very clear that this strange power in the valley was the power that Xiling and Bai Ling needed. Xiling, Bai Ling, we have entered the sword sect's forbidden area. If you want to absorb this power, hurry up. Although they had already entered the sword sect's forbidden area, Longao was very clear that they could be discovered at any time. If that was really the case, then things would be really troublesome. Xiling and Bai Ling's figures appeared. The two Genling nodded. Xiling said, "It is this power." Longao, don't you want to increase your strength? Is there a way? Even Longao couldn't resist such temptation, especially after he entered the Sky Martial continent. A green-grade Great Emperor was nothing in the Sky Martial continent where experts were as common as clouds. Any random person would have a strength that was above them. Therefore, Longao wanted to increase his strength very much. Even if it was to increase his strength by one level, it would be the best thing. Young Master Long, you only need to absorb the power here. Remember, you must act according to your strength. If you absorb too much, I'm afraid your body will explode and you will die. All right. After saying this, Xiling and Bai Ling immediately split up and started absorbing the mysterious power in the valley. Longao trusted Xiling and Bai Ling very much, but he didn't immediately start absorbing the mysterious power. After all, this power was suitable for the two Genling, but it might not be suitable for him. Because of this, Longao could only ask Long Fu first. Inside the Dragon Seal space. Longao's soul entered the Dragon Seal space and asked straightforwardly, "Long Fu, I believe you should have sensed the mysterious power outside. Bai Ling has already said that if I absorb this mysterious power, will my cultivation increase?" If it was an opportunity, Longao wouldn't choose to give it up. Because if he cultivated under normal circumstances, it wouldn't be easy to break through from the green-grade Great Emperor realm to the cyan-grade Great Emperor realm, let alone the higher realms. Longao calculated. Even with his talent and Long Fu's help, it would take at least half a year to break through to the next level. If he was unlucky, it might take even longer. Longao didn't want to wait, and he couldn't wait. Therefore, if the mysterious power outside could help him break through to the next level, he would take the risk even if it was dangerous. "Master, I've already sensed it. This mysterious power is indeed very strong, and it's very suitable for Genling to devour. If you devour a small amount, it should be helpful to your cultivation. But you can't devour too much. Otherwise, you will be devoured by this mysterious power and explode to death. It was almost the same as what Bai Ling had said. Longao was relieved, but he still asked, Long Fu, if I devour this mysterious power, can I really break through to the Cyan Grade Great Emperor realm? No. No. He was very curious. Xiling had already said that if he entered the forbidden area, his cultivation could at least break through to the next level. Longao was very clear that Xiling had no reason to lie to him, but Long Fu had no reason to lie to him either. What was going on? Chapter 10:10. Master, according to what Xiling said, she's going to help you break through. I see. Without asking any more questions, Longao left the dragon seal space and immediately began to absorb the mysterious energy around him. Longao wasn't that greedy. He knew his limits. Since Xiling, Bai Ling, and Long Fu had already said so, Longao wouldn't casually absorb more mysterious energy. After about half an hour, Longao shrugged helplessly. He realized that he was already full and couldn't continue. If it was anyone else, they would definitely die from overeating. However, Longao was still able to control himself. Longao, to thank you, I'll help you break through to the next level. As expected. Just like what Long Fu said, he couldn't increase his strength just by absorbing the mysterious energy. He needed Xiling's help. Longao didn't refuse. What Xiling needed to do was simple. He needed to borrow his Genling's power to transform the energy that Longao had absorbed. Furthermore, the speed of integration had reached a terrifying level. It would have taken a month. However, with Xiling's help, the time was reduced to 2 hours. Longao, the rest is up to you. How much you can improve depends on you. Thank you. Regarding the meaning of what Xiling said, how could Longao not know? Without any hesitation, Longao immediately sat on the ground and began to cultivate. Just like what Xiling said, how much he could improve depended on himself. Of course, he hoped that he could improve as much as possible. Looking at Longao who had entered the state of cultivation, Xiling suddenly asked, Bai Ling, let me ask you. Have you fallen in love with this brat? Bai Ling did not expect that her sister would suddenly ask this question. She was shocked and subconsciously shook her head, replying, Sister, no. Mph, Bai Ling, I want to remind you not to forget your identity. If you really like him, it won't be good for you and him. You'd better take care of yourself. Got it, sister. In the following period of time, Bai Ling and Xiling continued to devour the mysterious energy in the valley. Longao, on the other hand, was fully immersed in his cultivation. They divided the work and worked together, not delaying each other. With Xiling's help, the energy that Longao had just devoured had turned into energy and merged with Longao's body. In just 1 short hour, Longao realized that his cultivation base had risen from the beginner green grade Great Emperor realm to the peak green grade Great Emperor realm. He was only 1 step away from breaking through to the green grade Great Emperor realm. Although it was only a difference of 1 level, Longao was very clear that the green grade Great Emperor realm and the green grade Great Emperor realm were not on the same level. Longao did not have much ambition. As long as he could reach the green grade Great Emperor realm, even if it was just the beginner green grade Great Emperor realm, it would be good enough. It was only 1 step away, but it was as difficult as ascending to the heavens. Longao did not dare to relax. The opportunity was right in front of him. It was up to him to seize it. 1 step away. Xiling and Bai Ling were also fully absorbing the mysterious energy in the valley. The 2 Genling were very clear that the more mysterious energy they absorbed, the more beneficial it would be for them. Sister, young Master Long has broken through. Xiling nodded. She seemed to be a little surprised. In her opinion, even with her help, Longao could only break through to the beginner green grade Great Emperor realm. She did not expect Longao to break through again after breaking through to the green grade Great Emperor realm. According to this trend, could he break through to the yellow grade Great Emperor realm? This kind of cultivation talent was a little too strong. Just like what Bai Ling said, Longao finally broke through from the green grade Great Emperor realm to the green grade Great Emperor realm after 2 hours of hard work. However, Longao did not choose to stop there. Instead, he continued to improve and prepared to break through to the yellow-grade Great Emperor realm in one go. Time passed bit by bit. Longao's cultivation was also increasing bit by bit. Although the speed was very slow, for a martial artist, such a cultivation speed was already at the level of defying the natural order. Even if it was a super genius, it was impossible to do this. In the end, Longao still could not break through to the yellow-grade Great Emperor realm. He had only reached the peak green-grade Great Emperor realm. Even so, Longao was pleasantly surprised. Longao was very confident. With his current strength, he could even fight against a blue-grade Great Emperor realm martial artist. If he used all his trump cards, it would not be impossible for him to kill a blue-grade Great Emperor realm martial artist. 10th realm Great Emperor realm. He had already reached the peak green-grade Great Emperor realm. With this speed, he believed that it would not take long for him to break through to the Great Emperor realm and reach the so-called demigod realm. Young Master Long, congratulations. Congratulations. Longao accepted the two genlings' congratulations and asked, "How are the two of you?" "Young Master Long, our luck is too good. Just now when we were absorbing the energy here, we found out that someone had set a seal here. If we can break the seal, I believe there will be a surprise." Seal? He was very curious. Who would be bored enough to leave a seal in this mysterious place? Could it be a senior expert from the sword sect? That was the only explanation. Since he was already here, Longao also wanted to know who had sealed this place. He asked, "What should we do?" "It's very simple. With the three of us, we are unable to break the seal. I have already sensed that the owner of the seal is a sword expert. Although his strength is below mine, he is already very powerful in this continent. Even Emperor Ken, whom you have met before, is no match for him." F***CK. His heart skipped a beat. Of course, Longao knew what Xiling meant. It was hard for him to imagine who in the sword sect was more powerful than Emperor Ken. However, Longao knew that Xiling would not lie to him. It seemed like there was something fishy about this matter. If Emperor Ken knew about this, who knew what Murong Guenar would think? "Xiling, you mean to say that to break the seal, we need the way of the sword?" "That's right. I know that you have already had an epiphany in the way of the sword. Your understanding of the way of the sword is no longer the same as before. So, try and see if you can break the seal with your way of the sword." Somewhat helpless, Longao smiled bitterly and said, "Xiling, are you joking? With my strength, how can I break the seal?" Longao felt that it was a little funny. Since the other party's strength was only at the level of Heavenly Emperor Ao Jian, it was obvious how terrifying the other party's strength was. Would he be able to break the seal left behind by such an expert by himself? Longao, breaking the seal is not just about strength. It depends on the understanding and opportunity of the way of the sword. Chapter 10-11. I see. Regarding the meaning of what Purple Spirit said, Longao already understood. Regardless of strength, they only talked about the comprehension of sword principle. Following Xiling and Bai Ling to the seal, Longao's expression changed slightly after sensing it. The evolution of sword principle. Did I sense it wrongly? Curious, Longao tried to sense it again, but he still sensed that the seal in front of him was an evolution of sword principle with terrifying power. Longao was sure that the power of the seal was enough to kill a supreme divine path warrior. What did that mean? Longao, how is it? Although Xiling and Bai Ling were very powerful, the two sword spirits were not sword Dao martial artists. Their understanding of sword Dao was minimal. To be honest, the power of the seal is an evolution of sword principle. If ordinary people force their way in, they will be killed by the sword chi. I see. Xiling and Bai Ling were also afraid. If the two Genling were at their peak, they would not be afraid of the power of the seal, but the problem now was that neither Xiling nor Bai Ling had reached 1/20th of their peak, so they did not dare to break the seal by force. Young Master Long, do you have a way to break the seal? The two Genling seemed to be very anxious. Longao could only nod and say, I'll try. Regarding breaking the seal, Longao did not have full confidence either. The evolution of sword principle. As Bai Ling said, it was impossible to break the seal by force. As long as he started with sword principle, there might be a chance to break the seal. Longao did not act rashly, but instead, he multiplied the sword chi on the spot. With a kind of unruly sword principle, he slowly multiplied the sword principle, one sword after another, trying to merge with the evolution of sword principle on the seal. In this way, he could break the seal. After multiplying the sword principle for 2 hours, Longao still could not merge it. Young Master Long, is it still not enough? Xiling and Bai Ling began to panic. This was because this was a forbidden area for the way of the sword. If they were discovered by the elites of the sword sect, they might not even be able to leave the forbidden area safely, let alone break the seal. Longao was aware of the two genlings' worries. He shrugged helplessly. Letting out a sigh, Longao said helplessly, "The evolution of the sword path in the seal is very powerful and profound. Just by relying on my spiritual martial force, I am unable to merge the evolution of the sword path to break the seal." Longao did not continue, but the meaning of his words was very clear. "Sister, let's help him. Sister, we know nothing about the sword Dao. How can we help young Master Long?" Bai Ling was very curious because she and her sister did not know anything about the sword Dao. Even if they wanted to help Longao, they would not be able to. "Although we do not know anything about the sword Dao, with our supernatural powers, we can speed up Longao's understanding of the sword Dao." "Yes, sister is right. With our current strength, we can speed up young Master Long's understanding of the sword Dao by dozens of times." Longao did not know what the two genling were talking about. Before Longao could ask, Xiling had already said, "Longao, you have not had enough time to understand the sword Dao. Therefore, my sister and I plan to speed up your understanding. How much you can understand will depend on your luck." He nodded. Since the opportunity had come, Longao certainly would not choose to give it up easily. Next, Xiling and Bai Ling used all their strength to set up a small purple and white aura space in front of Longao. Bai Ling said, "Young Master Long, you have 2 hours to comprehend. I hope you can make some progress." "Thank you." Longao did not hesitate at all and immediately stepped into the purple and white aura space. Inside the purple-white space, there were 2 sword spirits pouring their full strength into it. As soon as Longao stepped in, he felt that something was wrong inside. He did not dare to hesitate and immediately began to reproduce sword chi. He hoped that he could improve his swordsmanship under the acceleration of dozens of times. Sword Dao reproduction. Previously, when he had an epiphany of the sword Dao, Longao followed the trajectory and produced sword chi. It could be said that he had somewhat memorized all the trajectories and sword chi. But one had to know. Regardless of whether it was a warrior or a swordsman, everyone's epiphany was different. Some people's epiphany could soar to the sky, while some people's epiphany could not improve at all. Moreover, the content of the epiphany was different. Just like that, Longao continued to produce sword chi in the powerful space. Gradually, Longao slowly produced a set of sword skills. This sword skill was different from other sword skills. Because it was created by Longao, it was most suitable for him. It might not be suitable for others to cultivate. In other words, this sword skill was created by Longao himself. As for its power, it was unknown. 36 Thunder Styles. Longao found that every time he produced a sword skill, it was like rolling thunder and surging tsunamis. There were 36 styles in the sword skill. Therefore, Longao officially named it 36 Thunder Styles. Outside the purple and white space. "Sister, it seems that young Master Long has gained a lot." Nodding, Xiling was also a little surprised. Because in the space, there were thunderous sword chi sounds constantly. It was very powerful. "I hope that Longao will be able to break the seal." Both Bai Ling and Xiling were looking forward to Longao's improvement. In the purple and white space, although Longao had already produced 36 Thunder Styles, it was not mature yet. One sword after another, in the eyes of outsiders, there was no pattern. It was like a child playing with a sword. However, in the eyes of sword Dao warriors, especially sword Dao experts, Longao's sword chi reproduction was very powerful. 2 hours later, the purple and white space disappeared. With the two genlings' current strength, they could only maintain it for 2 hours. This was also a great risk. However, in order to break the seal, the two genlings seemed to have gone all out. Indirectly, the two genling had helped Longao. The comprehension this time not only allowed Longao's comprehension of the sword principle to reach a higher level, but it also allowed him to create the 36 Thunderbolt styles. Longao was pleasantly surprised by this. Longao, remember, don't break the seal by force. You have to try to break the seal by following the seal sword Dao. According to my calculations, if you can break the seal, your understanding of sword Dao will reach a higher level. Yes, I understand. Several hours had passed. No one knew when they would be discovered. Therefore, Longao was very clear that he had to break the seal as soon as possible. He came to the front of the seal. This time, Longao did not immediately produce sword chi to try to merge with the seal sword Dao. Instead, he stood quietly and tried to communicate with the sword Dao within the seal. Xiling and Bai Ling, who were standing aside, did not disturb him at all. They also waited quietly. Just like this, the entire valley was silent. Even if a needle fell to the ground, it would probably be heard. Chapter 10-12. About 10 minutes later, Longao's footsteps began to move slowly. Seeing this, Xiling and Bai Ling were overjoyed. However, they did not dare to say anything and took a few steps back. Longao successfully sensed the evolution of the seal's sword principle. Gradually, he followed suit. Just as Xiling said, sensing the evolution of the seal's sword principle would bring great benefits to his sword principle cultivation. Longao did not give up on this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. 36 Thunder Forms. Longao used the evolution of the seal's sword principle to continuously verify and improve the 36 Thunder Forms. Longao's understanding of the sword principle cultivation improved at a terrifying speed. Follow me. Xiling and Bai Ling were extremely excited. Without any hesitation, they immediately grabbed Longao's hand. In the next second, the three of them disappeared from the valley. In the valley, black fog lingered and black wind blew, giving off an extremely gloomy feeling. Martial Artists Alliance. Yu Yin Wang, who had successfully obtained the inheritance of the Dark Realm, was now the most protected person of the Martial Artists Alliance. Her status had risen. In the world of darkness, he was the supreme existence. In the main hall, apart from the leader of the Martial Artists Alliance, Tong Tiendi, Hades, and Yu Yin Wang were all present. Yu Yin, you've successfully reached the virtual god realm. In the next year, the leader and I have discussed with each other. We'll train you to the peak of the heavenly god realm. Thank you, leader. Thank you, master. Yu Yin was expressionless as if this matter had nothing to do with her. Hades and Tong Tiendi shook their heads helplessly. Yu Yin, if you want to be with the person you love forever, you must completely refine the Dark Realm's inheritance. In 3 years, no matter what method you use, you must improve your cultivation to the supreme divine path. Leader, I'll do my best. Looking at Yu Yin's indifferent expression, even Tong Tiendi felt helpless. Glancing at Hades, Tong Tiendi's meaning was clear. Nodding his head, Hades suddenly said, Yu Yin, master and the leader promise you that as long as you can break through to the supreme divine path, not only can you be with Longao, but Longao can also become the deputy leader of the Martial Artists Alliance. Deputy leader? Hearing her master's words, Yu Yin seemed to be a little surprised. That was because she knew very well what it meant to be the Vice Alliance leader. Could Longao really become the deputy leader? Regardless of whether others believed it or not, she definitely did not believe it. Seeing that Yu Yin did not answer, Hades instantly guessed Yu Yin's thoughts. Smiling, he said, Yu Yin, the leader already knows Longao's identity. If it weren't for the leader's favoritism, do you think Longao would be able to leave the Martial Artists Alliance? Yu Yin was not a fool. Of course, she knew what her master meant. Yu Yin was also well aware of the grudge between Longao and Shangguan Yi. She also knew that the leader had been favoring Longao. However, Even now, she still did not know why the leader was favoring Longao. One must know that Longao was just a small figure in the Jojo continent. In front of the leader of the Martial Artists Alliance, Longao was not even an ant. Not to mention favoritism, even if he looked, Heavenly Emperor Tong might not even give Longao a glance. Yu Yin's personality had always been carefree. Back in Chihua Town in the Jojo continent, she was known as the domineering lady. One could imagine how domineering Yu Yin's personality was. Leader, I want to ask, why are you doing this? Yu Yin, don't be rude. Waving his hand, he stopped Hades. Tong Tiendi admired and liked the girl in front of him very much. Smiling, he said, Yu Yin, I know what you mean. The reason why I am helping Longao, other than the fact that Longao and I are fated, is because of Longao's talent and potential. Without waiting for Yu Yin to speak, Tong Tiendi continued, I can also agree to what your master said just now. What do you think? Yu Yin could doubt her master, but she could not doubt Tong Tiendi. No matter what, Tong Tiendi was the leader of the Martial Artists Alliance. His words carried enormous weight. She believed that Tong Tiendi would not go back on his words under normal circumstances. Thank you, leader. I will do my best. All right, you can leave first. Master, leader, Yu Yin will leave first. Seeing the two of them nod, Yu Yin slowly retreated, turned around, and left. After a while, she opened the door and left, disappearing without a trace. At this moment, there were only two people left in the hall. One was the leader of the Martial Artists Alliance, Tong Tiendi, and the other was Yu Yin's master, Hades. Leader, are we really going to let Longao and Yu Yin be together? From the beginning to the end, Hades had never agreed to let Longao and Yu Yin be together. The reason was simple. In Hades' opinion, Longao was not worthy of his disciple. However, Yu Yin's situation was a little different. If he disagreed, wouldn't it delay Yu Yin's cultivation? Hades, this matter ends here. Leader. Waving his hand, Tong Tiendi did not give Hades a chance to speak. He said, Longao's talent and potential are not bad. If possible, I hope that Yu Yin and Longao can be together. I have also considered what you said just now. If possible, not only can Longao become the vice leader, he can also become an elder. He cursed in his heart. Hades' position in the Martial Artists Alliance was very high. However, in front of Tong Tiendi, it was still not enough. Even if Hades was very unwilling, the matter had already reached this point. Even the leader had spoken. How could he object? Since that's the case, we'll listen to the Alliance Master's arrangements. However, Alliance Master, Yuin has already obtained the inheritance of the Dark World. If she were to refine it under normal circumstances, she would need at least 100 years. Even with the help of the Dark World's power, it wouldn't be easy for her to reach the Supreme Divine Tao realm. Hades valued his disciple very much. Otherwise, he would not have acted like this. After thinking for a while, Tong Tiendi said, the Dark World. If Yu Yin can really refine the Dark World, then we will have hope of reaching the peak of the martial Tao. Therefore, we cannot be careless about Yu Yin's matter. Hades, I will leave Yu Yin's matter to you. From now on, you will bring Yu Yin into the Aquamoon Heavenly Cave and break through to the Supreme Divine Path as soon as possible. Hearing the leader's words, Hades was immediately delighted. She said, thank you, leader. As long as Yu Yin can break through to the Supreme Divine Path, I will gather all the elders to help Yu Yin break through to the Nirvana realm in one fell swoop. The Alliance Master's words carried enormous weight. Hades was pleasantly surprised. She knew very well that once the leader and the elders helped, then Yu Yin would definitely reach the Nirvana realm. Moreover, the speed would be greatly increased. Chapter 10-13. In the Sword Sect. In the Forbidden Valley. Longao, Xiling, and Bai Ling entered the seal. Longao did not break the seal. Instead, he merged with the seal and used his sword principle to enter the seal. This was Longao's fortune. If an ordinary person, even a sword principle martial artist, tried to break the seal by force, they would only end up being obliterated. Inside a cave that wasn't too big. With a flash of white light, the three of them entered the cave. Xiling and Bai Ling looked around in surprise, but Longao was very curious. "Can you tell me why you're here? Young Master Long, do you know what this cave means?" He shook his head. "How would he know?" Bai Ling smiled and continued, "If my sister and I are not wrong, this cave should have been left behind by a senior from the sword sect." Longao had already seen that in the deepest part of the cave, there was a huge futon with a skeleton on it. "Are you talking about him?" Seeing Bai Ling and Xiling nod, Longao said with some fear, "Is the spiritual soul of this sword sect expert here?" Regarding this matter, Longao had a huge headache. He had encountered many skeletons before, but because the spiritual soul of the skeletons was still there, he had almost lost his life. Longao was almost certain that the seal outside was left behind by this skeleton. If the spiritual soul of such an expert was still there, not only himself, but even Xiling and Bai Ling would be in trouble. "Young Master Long, don't worry. We have already sensed that apart from the skeleton, this person's spiritual soul has been destroyed." His spiritual soul has been destroyed. Hearing Bai Ling's words, Longao let out a long sigh of relief. Longao came in front of the skeleton and looked at the small line of words on the ground. After reading it, Longao sighed. Written on the ground were the words, "I have dominated the world for more than 1,000 years. I have killed all my enemies and defeated all my enemies. I am almost invincible in the world. I have no choice but to retire to the canyon of the sword sect. Unfortunately, I fought against the heavenly Tao and my body and soul were destroyed. Only then did I know that there is always someone better than me." Sword demon. Longao found it hard to imagine how powerful this sword demon was. He had dominated the world for more than 1,000 years and was almost invincible. How many people in the world could achieve such an arrogant and domineering attitude? A frog in a well. Ignoring Xiling, Longao respected the sword demon very much. After all, to be able to do this, it showed how powerful the sword demon was. Heavenly Tao. Longao shrugged helplessly. Perhaps others didn't know the heavenly Tao that the sword demon spoke of, but how could Longao not know? The heavenly Tao was the martial heaven continent's strongest martial artist. They had already reached the peak of the martial path. In the entire martial heaven continent, perhaps only the god diviner could surpass the heavenly Taos. The sword demon had been arrogant and conceited. Just like Long Tian, he had tried to challenge the heavenly Taos, but he hadn't expected to be defeated by the heavenly Taos. Bai Ling, I want to ask what realm this senior sword demon's cultivation base has reached. Longao was very curious about the sword demon's strength. However, he could guess that the sword demon's strength should be on the same level as Long Tian's. After all, anyone who dared to challenge the heavenly Taos had to be strong enough. Infinitely close to the heavenly Taos. As he had expected. Longao, the reason we came here is because there is something we need in this cave. However, you can try comprehending the sword demon's sword Tao. I trust it will be very useful to you. Understood. Xiling and Bai Ling immediately began to search for their things. Longao looked at the corpses in front of him. Whether it was the sword demon or Long Tian, they had both been the strongest martial artists on the martial heaven continent. However, they had both been defeated and killed when they challenged the heavenly Taos. Longao didn't continue to dwell on this question. He was very clear about the heavenly Taos. With his current strength, let alone challenging them, even meeting them was a question. Comprehending the sword demon's sword Tao. With such a rare opportunity, Longao naturally would not easily choose to give up. The entire cave was filled with extremely powerful sword Tao. This was the sword Tao that the sword demon had walked. Longao followed the sword Tao and slowly developed his own sword Tao. However, Longao didn't follow the sword demon's sword Tao. Otherwise, he would become the second sword demon and would never be able to be his true self. If he wanted to inherit the sword demon's sword Tao, then Longao would directly inherit the supreme divine Tao. Why would he need to slowly cultivate? He didn't know when he would be able to reach the supreme divine Tao. In other words, Longao comprehended the sword Tao with his own sword Tao as the main and the sword demon's sword Tao as the support. This way, once he merged the sword demon's sword Dao into his own sword Dao, it would be of great help to his comprehension of the sword Dao. Within the cave, both of them were sitting down and doing their own things. Longao used his finger to replace the sword and continuously tested his sword Dao with the sword demon's sword Dao. He was also testing the 36 Thunderbolt styles that he had just condensed. Sister, even if we obtain these things, we won't be able to return to our peak state and leave. Xiling nodded. Xiling's face was full of helplessness. How could she not know what her little sister meant? According to my estimation, if we refine these things, we can only recover half of our strength. It's impossible to return to our peak state. However, with Longao's help, we still have a great chance. Sister, I don't want to use the young master Long. Remember, we're not using him. We're just helping each other. When Longao helps us, he also benefits greatly. Just like this time, not only did he break through to the peak Cyan grade Great Emperor realm, he even created his own sword Dao. Moreover, he came here and met such an expert. Didn't he benefit from it? Xiling and Bai Ling's personalities were completely different. From Bai Ling's point of view, she was just using Longao. Even though she knew that both of them would benefit from it, Bai Ling still couldn't convince herself. Sister, I want to help young Master Long more. PH, you still say that you don't like Longao. Bai Ling, let me remind you again. You don't belong here. If you marry Longao, not only you, but he will also suffer. Do you understand? How could Bai Ling not know what her sister was talking about? Sister. Waving her hand, Violet Spirit did not give Bai Ling any chance to speak. Violet Spirit continued, Bai Ling, if you insist on going your own way, then don't blame me, your elder sister, for turning hostile. At that time, I can only kill Longao. Xiling was shocked. Sister, please don't. I promise you, no matter what happens, no matter when, I won't like young Master Long. However, I hope that you can help young Master Long more. Sure. Our task now is to find the things as soon as possible. Chapter 10:14. Bai Ling didn't dare to provoke Xiling. Found it. At this moment, Xiling exclaimed in surprise. In front of the two Genling, there was a very unpleasant-looking iron box. What the two Genling needed was in the iron box. Xiling didn't open it, but put the iron box into his arms first. Then, the two Genling turned around and looked at Longao. At this moment, following the trajectory of Sword Demon's sword principle, Longao continued to test his sword principle. He kept producing sword chi, sword after sword, without any pattern. It looked like a person who didn't know how to use a sword and was waving his sword randomly. Others couldn't tell and thought that Longao was out of his mind. But if a real sword principle expert was here, he would be shocked to find that Longao's sword chi had reached a certain level. Longao is going to condense the sword soul and sword essence. Nodding, Bai Ling was also surprised. The sword soul and sword essence were the most important foundation for a sword principle warrior. Only by condensing the sword soul and sword essence could one be considered to have truly entered the path of sword principle. Condense. Longao roared. Then, countless sword chi appeared around Longao and began to slowly enter his body. His soul began to condense and emit the aura of sword chi. This was the sword soul and sword essence. Longao found that after condensing the sword soul and sword essence, his sword principle strength instantly doubled. Although his realm didn't improve at all, his strength obviously soared. Sword principle. This was sword principle. Longao was looking forward to sword principle more and more. If he could condense the sword heart, it wouldn't be a joke even if his strength soared more than 3 times. The sword heart was above the sword soul and sword essence. Condensing the sword soul and sword essence meant that a warrior had truly entered the path of sword principle. As for condensing the sword heart, it meant that a swordsman had a small achievement in sword principle. Longao slowly stopped and opened his eyes. He was pleasantly surprised. Congratulations. Longao smiled and asked, "Did you find it?" "Young Master Long, we've found him, but we can't leave this place yet." "What happened?" He was very curious. Since the two of them had already found what they wanted, and he had also successfully condensed a sword soul and sword soul, as well as produced his own sword chi, why didn't they leave? Could it be that they were going to stay here forever? Longao, there's someone outside. So that was the case. Longao knew very well that those who could casually enter the forbidden area of the valley definitely had a high status and strength in the sword sect. After all, there were dozens of supreme Dao warriors guarding outside the forbidden area. Longao, since you have so much time, why don't you continue to propagate the sword Dao? Of course, Longao wanted to continue propagating the sword Dao. However, he understood that more was not necessarily better. It's enough. What's left is for us to slowly go back and comprehend the sword Dao. As for the sword demon's sword Dao, it doesn't suit me. I can only use it as a reference, but I can't fully accept it. Xiling and Bailing obviously didn't understand the sword Dao. However, the two Genling didn't say much. They turned into Purple Stream and White Stream and disappeared instantly, returning to the god-killing sword. In the entire cave, only Longao was left. Standing quietly in the cave, Longao looked at the skeleton in front of him and bowed respectfully. Senior Sword Demon, thank you for propagating the sword Dao. If there's a chance in the future, I'll definitely help you eradicate the heavenly Dao and take revenge. As soon as Longao finished speaking, the motionless skeleton suddenly cracked and turned into powder, disappearing without a trace. Ah! Looking at the disappearing skeleton, Longao was very surprised. He didn't know what had happened. The skeleton disappeared, but a trace of divine soul appeared. Sword Demon's divine soul? Looking at the unconscious Sword Demon's divine soul in front of him, Longao was shocked. Bai Ling had just said that the Sword Demon's body and soul were only bones left. Master, quickly capture the Sword Demon's divine soul. Once you refine him into a soul slave, even a Nirvana realm warrior won't be able to hurt you in the future. Refining the Sword Demon's divine soul made Longao somewhat uncomfortable. No matter what, he had just used the Sword Demon's sword Dao to verify his own sword Dao. If he were to refine the Sword Demon's divine soul himself, it would be a little unkind. In the Dragon Seal space. Master, I know what you're thinking. However, Master, the Sword Demon failed to challenge the heavenly Dao back then. Now that the remaining trace of divine soul has appeared, his meaning is very clear. The Sword Demon hopes that Master can defeat the heavenly Dao. After hearing Long Fu's words, the originally hesitant Longao nodded and expressed his agreement. Just as Long Fu had said, as long as he could defeat the heavenly Dao, then even if he had to refine the Sword Demon's divine soul, he believed that the Sword Demon would understand. In fact, Longao had already thought that the sudden disappearance of the Sword Demon's skeleton must be related to what he had said. Take revenge and defeat the heavenly Dao. Otherwise, he believed that the Sword Demon's divine soul would not appear. Since the Sword Demon hoped that he could defeat the heavenly Dao, Longao did not continue to hesitate. He immediately helped Long Fu and captured the Sword Demon's divine soul into the Dragon Seal space. In the following time, the Sword Demon's divine soul would be completely handed over to Long Fu. Long Fu, according to your calculations, how long will it take to refine the Sword Demon's divine soul into a soul slave? Longao was very much looking forward to the Sword Demon's divine soul being refined into a soul slave. Long Fu had already said that according to the Sword Demon's strength, even if it was just a trace of his divine soul, once it was refined into a soul slave, he believed that its power would not be small. Even a Nirvana realm martial artist would not be able to harm him. Although this matter sounded incomparably unbelievable, Longao was very clear that Long Fu had no need to trick him. Master, I know what you mean. Refining the Sword Demon's divine soul will take roughly 3 days. This is only a trace of the Sword Demon's divine soul. If there are no losses, once the refinement is successful, unless the heavenly Dao personally descends, Master will be able to walk unhindered in the Sky Martial continent. Nodding his head, Longao naturally understood what Long Fu meant. After all, the Sword Demon's strength was there for all to see. He could be said to be the strongest swordsman under the heavenly Dao. He believed that even the Emperor Ken and Murong Guenar might not be a match for the Sword Demon. 3 days. To him, 3 days was just a blink of an eye. Ever since he entered the Sky Martial continent, Longao discovered that with his strength, he was nothing. However, if he had the help of the Sword Demon's soul slave, Longao was very clear that even if Shangguan came again, he would not be obliterated at any time. After all, the strength of a Nirvana realm martial artist was too terrifying. Long Fu, have the people outside left? Bai Ling and Xiling had just sensed that there were people outside, but they did not know if there were still people outside. Longao did not dare to casually go out, because he had already guessed that the other party was definitely not simple. The Sword Demon's soul slave had not been refined successfully. Not to mention a Nirvana realm martial artist, even if it was a titled Great Emperor or a Supreme Realm martial artist, he would not be able to deal with them. Chapter 10-15. After Long Fu's repeated confirmation, all the people outside had left. Longao decided to be careful, and only left the cave after dozens of minutes. In the valley, it was still shrouded in black fog, eerie and terrifying. How should I leave? Longao looked at the exit and was in a dilemma. Previously, he had entered the forbidden area with the help of Xiling's power, but how could he leave now? Longao, I'll lead everyone away, you have to leave as soon as possible. He shrugged helplessly, because there was no other way to leave the forbidden area of the sword sect. Xiling came out instantly and disappeared in the valley in the blink of an eye. After waiting for a few seconds, Longao left, but he felt helpless. As soon as he appeared, his body was locked on by the aura of the divine path. Xiling did not succeed in leading away dozens of divine path warriors. What a shock! Longao did not dare to be careless, and immediately teleported toward the sword sect. Dozens of divine path warriors had already locked on to their target. Seeing their target disappear, dozens of divine path warriors would not give up, and immediately chased after him. Longao's speed was too fast, and with the help of teleportation, he had completely shaken off dozens of divine path warriors in a few seconds. Dozens of people looked at each other, and saw a trace of shock in each other's eyes. The opponent's strength is not very strong, but his speed is above yours and mine. This person has already entered the forbidden area. We have to report this to the master. Once the sect knows, we will be derelict in our duties. How will we explain it to the sect? After a deep sigh, dozens of people did not know what to do. After all, for so many years, such a thing had never happened. Someone dared to enter the forbidden area. Until now, they did not know who the opponent was. After successfully shaking off dozens of divine path warriors, Longao let out a long sigh of relief. Before Longao could return to his residence, he was intercepted again. Black Wolf, I'd like to see how you can defeat me today. The person who spoke was Xiao Yuan, who had been defeated by Longao in one move. He was also a green-grade Great Emperor. There were a total of 7 people, 3 green-grade Great Emperors and 4 blue-grade Great Emperors. How could an ordinary green-grade Great Emperor deal with such a force? However, Longao was not afraid at all. He sneered and said, "You?" Before Xiao Yuan and the rest of the people could react, Longao's figure suddenly disappeared. In the next second, Xiao Yuan's body flew out like a kite with a broken string and fell heavily on the ground. If it was not for Longao's mercy, this move alone was enough to take Xiao Yuan's life. Everyone was shocked. Old Feng shouted, 7-star sword formation. Immediately after, the 7 people immediately surrounded Longao, especially Xiao Yuan. There was a trace of blood at the corner of his mouth. His eyes were vicious, as if he wanted to swallow Black Wolf whole. The 7-star sword formation was after all a powerful formation in the sword sect. The sword sect's formation was different from the Wanzhan schools. The 7-star sword formation was based on the Big Dipper. All 7 people had to be swordsmen. The stronger the 7 people were, the stronger the formation's power. Is this how you treat your consecrator? If it was before entering the forbidden area, Longao might be afraid of blue-grade Great Emperors. But now, Longao could not understand. Under normal circumstances, with his current status, the 7 of them should be respectful to him, not to mention attacking him. In the end, the 7 of them still did not take him seriously. He believed that countless people in the sword sect had the same thought. Consecrator? Someone like you can become a consecrator? Mph, what a joke, what a joke. Today, we will teach you a lesson. The 7 of them did not dare to kill Black Wolf, but they could humiliate him. From the beginning to the end, Muronguena did not show up. Before the 7 of them attacked, Longao had already punched out with his fists. He was going to fight against the 7-star sword formation with his own strength. He wanted to end the battle quickly. Longao did not want to waste any time. The reason he entered the sword sect was to challenge the sword Dao warriors. Therefore, he would not waste any time for the 7 of them. 36 Thunderbolt Styles. Having just comprehended the 36 Thunderbolt Styles, Longao wanted to test the power of the 36 Thunderbolt Styles. Thunder rumbled. The deity-slaying sword in Longao's hand slashed out 3 times in a row. The overlapping power was not to be underestimated. Before the 7 of them could use the 7-star sword formation to teach Black Wolf a lesson, Longao had already broken the formation with 1 slash. In the situation of 1 against 7, Longao did not show any mercy. Each strike was faster than the previous one. At the peak of the green-grade Great Emperor realm, Longao's strength had increased by 3 times. Among the warriors of the same level, no one was a match for Longao. Even blue-grade Great Emperors would find it difficult to defeat Longao. This was Longao's super strength. However, among the 7 of them, 4 of them were blue-grade Great Emperors. Even if Longao wanted to defeat the 7 of them, it would not be an easy task. If they were experts in the sword Dao, Longao might have slowly battled with them to test his sword Dao. However, Longao had already discovered that the 7 people's comprehension of the sword principle was not very strong. In other words, even if he fought with the 7 of them for over 100 years, he believed that it would not benefit his comprehension of the sword principle in the slightest. After forcing the 7 of them away with 1 slash, Longao turned around and disappeared without a trace with the help of spatial teleportation. It was fine if Longao did not leave. However, the 7 of them thought that Black Wolf was afraid of them. A consecrator had escaped. This had never happened before in the history of the sword sect. Ha 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 ha, this is a consecrator. This is our Black Wolf consecrator. I'm dying of laughter. I'm dying of laughter. What a coward. It's hard for me to imagine why the master would find such a trash. He's a disgrace to the sword sect. The 7 of them laughed crazily. Their faces were filled with disdain and contempt. This was how humans were. Their status in the sword sect was not high. Normally, when they saw a consecrator, they would only be respectful. How would they dare to act like this? Now that they could humiliate a consecrator, the 7 of them felt extremely good. They wished they could immediately tell the entire sword sect, the entire Tianwu continent. However, before the 7 of them could finish laughing, they all fell to the ground with blood flowing out of their 7 orifices. A purple figure flashed. In the next second, Xiling appeared. He coldly looked at the corpses on the ground. Xiling's voice was extremely cold. Even death cannot wipe out your crimes. Xiling instantly vanished. From the beginning to the end, the 7 of them had never imagined that they would die. They hadn't even been able to see each other clearly, so they had no idea what had happened. Because in the sword sect, there was a rule that stated that no one was allowed to kill without permission. Otherwise, the lightest punishment would be expulsion from the sect, and the heaviest punishment would be death without mercy. Chapter 1016. Longao and Xiling successfully met up. However, from the beginning to the end, Longao didn't know what Xiling had done. Half an hour later, the news that Black Wolf had killed Xiaoyuan and the others had spread throughout the sword sect. Now, everyone in the sword sect thought that Black Wolf was the murderer. Even if it was a normal consecrator or an elder, they couldn't casually kill a disciple of the sword sect, let alone a disciple of the Great Emperor level. If it was a normal consecrator, someone would have already investigated the matter. However, Black Wolf's identity was a little special. No matter what, Black Wolf was brought back by the master himself. If they casually caused trouble for Black Wolf, It would be hard to explain to the master. When the sword sect's elder of law enforcement heard the news, he was furious. He immediately sent someone to find Black Wolf and bring him back to the main hall. Inside the main hall, the sword sect master, Murong Guena, wasn't in the sword sect. The punishment of the sword sect was usually handled by the elder of law enforcement. As a consecrator, Longao's position in the sword sect wasn't low. However, compared to the elder of law enforcement, it was like heaven and earth. Black Wolf, why aren't you kneeling when you see the elder of law enforcement? In the main hall, other than the elder of law enforcement, there were two other blue-grade great emperors. They were considered core disciples of the sword sect and also members of the Hall of Law Enforcement. After all, the elder of law enforcement couldn't personally enforce the law. Why should I kneel? Longao smiled. Before anyone could get angry, he continued, as a consecrator of the sword sect and someone appointed by the master, I can choose not to kneel. Master. Hearing Black Wolf mention the master, the two Hall of Law Enforcement disciples shut their mouths. Although the two of them were arrogant because of their status, they knew that they were just ants in front of their master. Black Wolf, even if you want to be arrogant, you'd better be obedient in front of me, the law enforcement elder. Otherwise, even if the master himself comes, you'll definitely die. May I know why the law enforcement elder is looking for me? In fact, Longao had already guessed why the law enforcement patriarch had asked him to come here. It was precisely because of this. Longao was extremely curious. Who was it that killed 7 people and framed him? But one had to know that he had just entered the sword sect and had no enemies at all. Could it be that someone was envious and jealous? Black Wolf, as a consecrator of the sect, you killed 7 people. I would like to hear your explanation. Black Wolf's status was always different. First, as a consecrator of the sword sect, Black Wolf couldn't be killed casually. Second, Black Wolf was brought back by the master himself. As the saying goes, even if you don't look at the monk, you have to look at the Buddha. I didn't. You dare to do it, but you don't dare to admit it. Law enforcement elder, I, Black Wolf, am an upright person. If it's true, then it's true. If it's not, then it's not. I didn't kill the 7 people. Why should I admit it? Longao, I killed the 7 people. As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly heard Xiling's words. Longao was shocked. He never thought that the real murderer of the 7 people would be Xiling. Why would Xiling do this? At this time, Longao knew very well that it wasn't the time to ask Xiling. It doesn't matter if you admit it or not. The fact that you killed the 7 people is right in front of us. You can't deny it. The law enforcement elder was obviously filled with murderous intent. Under his jurisdiction, there was someone who dared to disregard the sect and him. If he didn't kill the other party, where would he put his face? Considering that you're a consecrator of the sect, I'll spare your life. Men, cut off one of your arms and face the wall for a year. In the end, the law enforcement elder was still afraid of the master behind Black Wolf. He didn't dare to kill him. He could only cut off one of his arms and face the wall for a year. In this way, he would be able to answer to the sect when they returned. In fact, the law enforcement elder wasn't sure about the relationship between Black Wolf and the master. He sneered. The 2 blue-grade great monarch disciples walked over slowly with a cruel smile on their faces. They were not convinced. They were stronger than Hei Lang. Why could Hei Lang become a consecrator while they couldn't? That's how humans are. It's inevitable to be envious and jealous. Hearing the law enforcement elder's punishment, Longao was instantly enraged. The other party didn't have any evidence to prove that he was the one who killed the 7 people. But they rashly came to a conclusion. Not only did they want him to face the wall, but they also wanted to cut off one of his arms. In the end, these people were just jealous of him. Consecrator Black Wolf, sorry for the offense. Although they said sorry, the 2 of them were overjoyed. They couldn't wait to tear Black Wolf into pieces. Wouldn't that be even better? The 2 of them came in front of Longao. You look at me, I look at you. Do you want to do it, or should I? You do it. You're fast. Maybe he won't feel the pain. In their eyes, The consecrator Black Wolf in front of them was just a lamb waiting to be slaughtered. The question now was who would be slaughtering him. All right, if that's the case, I'll do it. With a sneer, the great Emperor expert used his palm as a knife and slashed towards Longao's left arm. If it was an ordinary person, they wouldn't be able to withstand this attack. Their arm would be easily chopped off. But the opponent was Longao. Longao sneered in his heart. Without waiting for the other party to come down, Longao used an inconceivable footwork and ruthlessly struck back with a palm strike. Although Longao did not use his full strength in this palm strike, it was more than enough to heavily injure the other party. Under normal circumstances, even with Longao's strength, it wouldn't be easy to defeat a blue-grade Great Emperor expert in an instant. But this time, the situation was completely different. Not to mention Longao's strength, the other party couldn't dodge the attack due to his carelessness. Ah! With a miserable shriek, the man's body was sent flying like a kite with its string cut off. Not only that, but one of his arms was also cut off. Looking at the unconscious disciple on the ground, the law-enforcing elder was shocked. He roared furiously, "Black Wolf, how dare you attack?" "Mph, law-enforcing elder, I've already said that I'm a consecrator of the sect and I didn't kill the 7 people. If you insist on blaming me, I have nothing to say. But it's not your turn to enforce the law." Since the matter had already developed to this point, Longao would naturally not compromise because he knew very well in his heart that the more he compromised, the more miserable his end would be. Even though he was a worshipper of the sword sect, he was nothing to the entire sword sect. Now that the sect master was not here, many people disliked him. The more he was in a situation like this, the more he had to appear unyielding. "Black Wolf, you." Waving his hand, Longao's face was filled with disgust. How could such a person become the law-enforcing elder of the sword sect? It seemed that the situation was the same no matter where one went. There were good people and bad people. I've already made myself clear. I don't want to repeat myself. Goodbye. Looking at Black Wolf who was about to leave, the law-enforcing elder's face was extremely gloomy. Chapter 10:17. How arrogant. As the sword sect's law enforcement elder, he had never been humiliated like this before. It was simply a great humiliation. "Black Wolf, you're courting death." The sword sect's law enforcement elder was an enlightened martial artist. His strength was unimaginable. Before the law enforcement elder could make a move, 2 figures suddenly appeared. Master, Grand Elder. Looking at the 2 people who suddenly appeared, everyone respectfully bowed and greeted them. The sword sect master, Nguena, was known as the Emperor Ken. The other person was the sword sect's Grand Elder, Yi Xian. His strength was unfathomable, and he was considered the 2nd strongest person in the sword sect. Waving his hand, Nguena sat at the head of the table. As for Grand Elder, Yi Xian, he sat at the head of the table on the right. "Changsheng, what happened?" Yi Xian's voice was extremely dignified. With his status and identity, even the law enforcement elder trembled in fear. He glared fiercely at Black Wolf in front of him. The law enforcement elder, also known as Lu Changsheng, said, "Master, Grand Elder, Black Wolf, as a consecrator, killed 7 disciples for no reason. According to the sect rules, I only chopped off one of his arms and had him reflect on his actions for a year. However, he chopped off the arm of a law enforcement disciple. The law enforcement disciple whose arm was chopped off had already regained consciousness. Seeing the master and Grand Elder appear, he could only swallow the anger in his heart. However, his vicious gaze was fixed on the culprit who chopped off his arm. "Black Wolf, is this true?" Yi Xian was also very surprised. This was because the master had already told him about Black Wolf's matter. If that was the case, why would Black Wolf kill the sect's disciples for no apparent reason? Yi Xian asked. The law enforcement elder, Lu Changsheng, stood to the side obediently. He was angry, but he did not dare to speak. "Master, Grand Elder, I've already told the disciplinary elder that I didn't do it. If you insist on forcing it on me, I have nothing to say." "Black Wolf, you." Waving his hand, Yi Xian's voice turned cold as he asked, Changsheng, do you have any evidence? In fact, Murong Guenar and Yi Xian still didn't believe that Black Wolf would harm the 7 great emperor's disciples. Black Wolf's goal was very clear, and that was to constantly challenge sword experts. If not for his invitation, Black Wolf would not have joined the sword sect, and he would not have become a consecrator of the sect. Evidence. Hearing that the Great Elder wanted evidence from him, Lu Changsheng was in a difficult position. Seeing that the First Elder was truly enraged, Lu Changsheng was so frightened that he immediately knelt on the ground. The other 2 law enforcement disciples also knelt down. Great Elder, someone saw the 7 of them fighting with Black Wolf. Enough. Lu Changsheng and the other 2 were so frightened that they didn't dare to say anything else. They hated Black Wolf to the core and wanted to tear Black Wolf into pieces. Do you know your crime for framing a consecrator without evidence? Great Elder, Changsheng knows his mistake. Get out. Not daring to continue talking nonsense, Lu Changsheng and the other 2 left the hall one after another. When the 3 of them were about to leave, they glared fiercely at Black Wolf. Their meaning was very clear. After the 3 of them left, there were only 3 people left in the hall. Sword Sect Master Murong Guenar, Great Elder Yi Xian, and Sword Sect Consecrator Black Wolf, who was also the so-called Longao. Longao, let me ask you now. Did you do this? I didn't. Longao replied resolutely. After thinking for a while, he continued, the 7 of them came looking for trouble with me twice in a row, but their comprehension of the sword Dao was too poor. Therefore, I did not continue to fight with them, and the 7 of them were not killed by me. I believe you. You can leave. Many thanks. Longao turned and slowly left. In just a moment, he had vanished without a trace. Master, this shouldn't have been done by Longao. Murong Guenar nodded. Of course, he chose Longao. Although they had known each other for a long time, he understood Longao's character very well. Great Elder, no matter what happens, you have to be on good terms with Longao. He isn't simple. I have a feeling that the martial heaven continent structure will change because of him. Hearing the master's words, Yi Xian was startled. Yi Xian had never imagined that the master would have such a high evaluation of Longao. It was no wonder that he had personally invited Longao to become a consecrator of the sect. After all, with Longao's status and strength, it was impossible for him to become a consecrator of the sect under normal circumstances. This was also the real reason why many people didn't like Longao. Great Elder, go arrange for Longao to enter the Sword Pagoda to cultivate. Sword Pagoda? Yi Xian cursed in his heart. It was truly infuriating to compare oneself with others. Because of the significance of the Sword Pagoda, Yi Xian was very clear. A consecrator who had just entered the Sword Sect, and was only a Cyan Great Sovereign, could enter the Sword Pagoda to cultivate. If this matter was known by others, Yi Xian was almost certain that it would cause a lot of trouble. Master, if this matter were to be known by others, I'm afraid it would cause gossip. The Sword Pagoda was the absolute cultivation sacred ground of the Sword Sect. Ordinary people wouldn't be able to enter. Even the most outstanding and talented disciples of the Sword Sect wouldn't be able to enter. How could Murong Guenar not understand the Great Elder's intention? Longao will enter the Sword Pagoda to cultivate. He will deal with the rest of the matters himself. As for us, we won't interfere as long as they don't cross the line. After listening to the master's words, Yi Xian felt somewhat uncomfortable. After all, Longao's status and strength were obvious. Not to mention others, even he would have a knot in his heart if he was allowed to enter the Sword Pagoda. However, the Sword Sect had already spoken. Even if he was extremely unwilling, he could only agree to it. Outside the main hall, Lu Changsheng and the other 2 didn't leave. Seeing Black Wolf come out, the law enforcement disciple whose arm had been chopped off just now snorted and said, Black Wolf, you're lucky this time. Don't think that you'll be fine. One day, I will make you return my arm. Lu Changsheng waved his hand. His expression was extremely ugly. Putting aside who was in the right and who was in the wrong, just his reputation had been completely lost. If he didn't deal with Black Wolf, How would he be able to establish himself in the sword sect in the future? Black Wolf, consecrators are nothing in our eyes. Remember this. I will let you know the consequences of provoking me. Longao didn't care about the threats of the three people at all. He didn't say a word because it would be an insult to his intelligence to speak to such brainless people. He turned around and prepared to leave. Black Wolf. This time, Longao didn't give Lu Changsheng a chance to speak. He said, Lu Changsheng, if you want to look for trouble, then I'll accompany you at any time. However, I hope that you can be more open and above board. Don't think that you're some sort of thing. In my eyes, you're even inferior to trash. I'm truly curious. How could trash like you become a law enforcement elder of the sword sect? Chapter 1018. After saying that, Longao swaggered off. Looking at the gradually disappearing figure, Lu Changsheng's face was extremely gloomy, as ugly as it could get. Even though Lu Changsheng was furious, in the end, Lu Changsheng did not make a move. No matter what, they were still outside the main hall. Moreover, the master and the great elder were inside. If they were to make a move now, no one knew which side the great elder and the master would stand on. Elder, what should we do now? I will let Black Wolf die without a burial place. Then, the three of them laughed eerily. Back at the residence, Longao asked impatiently, Xiling, let me ask you, why did you kill the 7 of them? Of course, Xiling would not tell Longao that he killed the 7 of them because they kept humiliating him. It was just convenient. Convenient. Hearing Xiling's words, Longao felt extremely helpless because he never thought that Xiling would use this as an excuse. Longao did not continue to ask. Xiling was born to be unreasonable. The more he said, the more mistakes he would make. It was better not to say anything. Longao was very depressed. He'd entered the sword sect this time with the intention of ceaselessly challenging various sword Dao cultivators. Unless he had no other choice, otherwise, he wasn't willing to cause any trouble. But sometimes, things were like this. Even if you did not want to get into trouble, trouble would always come to you and you could not stop it. Longao. Just as Longao was feeling depressed, the door was gently pushed open and Murong Yanga walked in from outside. Seeing an acquaintance, Longao was happy because in the entire sword sect, besides Murong Guena, Murong Yanga was the closest to him. Yanga, why are you here? I should have come earlier, but I was delayed by some matters. Longao, I've heard about the matter between you and Lu Changsheng. I have to remind you that Lu Changsheng is a very sinister person. You have to be careful. Longao was aware of Yang Er's worries and reminders. He smiled. Longao said nonchalantly, different situations call for different measures. Lu Changsheng is just jealous of me. No matter what, you have to be careful. There's one more thing. Father and the Grand Elder have just decided to let you enter the Sword Pagoda later. Yang what is a Sword Pagoda? Longao had no idea what the Sword Pagoda that Yang mentioned was. Yang and Longao sat down. Next, Yang started talking about the Sword Pagoda. The Sword Pagoda was the supreme cultivation holy land of the Sword sect. The Sword Pagoda had a total of 9 floors. Under normal circumstances, unless the Master or the Grand Elder personally allowed it, no one, not even the Guardian Elders, could easily step into the Sword Pagoda. According to Yang, with his status and strength, he was not qualified to enter the Sword Pagoda to cultivate. As for the reason, even Murong Yang did not know what was going on. There was no need to ask or guess. Longao was almost certain that it was Murong Guena's arrangement that he could enter the Sword Pagoda this time. However, he could not understand why Murong Guena would treat him like this. Could it be because of his relationship with Murong Yang? That was not very likely. After all, he and Yang were only friends. As for his talent and potential, it was even more impossible to talk about. After all, there were many people in the sword sect who had greater talent and potential than him. Shrugging his shoulders helplessly, Longao did not continue to dwell on this issue. Longao, you must be careful when you enter the Sword Pagoda. Anyone who can enter the Sword Pagoda is a battle maniac. Moreover, If Lu Changsheng knows that you have entered the Sword Pagoda, he will definitely be envious and jealous. At that time, he will definitely think of ways to deal with you. Longao was well aware of Yanger's worries. Yanger, do you know when I can enter the Sword Pagoda? Longao began to look forward to the Sword Pagoda. According to Yanger, the Sword Pagoda was the cultivation holy land of the Sword Sect. Now that he had just broken through to the peak green-grade Great Emperor realm, it would be great if he could use the Sword Pagoda to break through to the blue-grade Great Emperor realm. 10 days later. Yanger smiled and continued, you can enter the Sword Pagoda at any time. However, since you have just entered the Sword Sect, my father wants you to familiarize yourself with the environment first. When the time comes, you can enter the Sword Pagoda and find a good place to cultivate. As for how far you can go, it will depend on your luck. I see. 10 days' time was just a blink of an eye for the current Longao. Next. Longao and Yanger chatted for a few hours. After sending off Yanger, Longao immediately entered into cultivation. He had already reached the peak green-grade Great Emperor realm and was only one step away from officially breaking through to the blue-grade Great Emperor realm. This step could be said to be simple, but it could also be said to be difficult. If the opportunity was right, then the breakthrough would only take a moment. In the Dragon Seal space. Master, once the Sword Demon's divine soul is refined into a soul slave, its power might not be able to withstand the attack of a Nirvana realm martial artist. Long Fu, what's going on? Hearing Long Fu's words, Longao was very curious. Previously, Long Fu had said that once the Sword Demon's divine soul was refined successfully, even if a Nirvana realm martial artist came, he would be able to leave easily. This did not mean that the Sword Demon's soul slave could defeat a Nirvana realm martial artist. It could only withstand the attack. After all, the Sword Demon had only left a trace of his soul. Even if it was refined into a soul slave, not to mention a Nirvana realm martial artist, it might not even be able to defeat a Supreme Divine realm martial artist. However, Longao was still very much looking forward to it. Even if it could not defeat a Nirvana realm martial artist, it would still be a very awesome thing for him. At the very least, if he encountered a high-level martial artist in the future, he would not have to wait for death. Master, after so many years, a lot of the Sword Demon's divine soul has been lost. According to my prediction, once it is refined into a soul slave, even a Supreme Divine realm martial artist would not be able to defeat the Sword Demon's soul slave. However, it would be more than enough to withstand the attack of a Supreme Divine realm martial artist. In this case, at least Master would have enough time to leave. Longao nodded. Regarding this point, how could he not know? Long Fu, what if you encounter Shangguan Yi? Longao was still concerned about this matter. After all, Shangguan Yi was a Nirvana realm martial artist. She could appear at any time and anywhere. Moreover, he could not be so lucky every time. What if there was no one to help him? The consequences would be unimaginable. I can't withstand it. Master, I will refine the Sword Demon into a soul slave first. In the future, I will continue to think of ways to continuously integrate power into it. I know that it can withstand the attack of a Nirvana realm martial artist. However, Master, you still have to be mentally prepared. The Sword Demon's soul slave can at most defeat martial artists below the title level. As for martial artists above the Supreme Divine realm, it can only withstand but not defeat them. Chapter 1019. Regarding Long Fu's words, Longao was already mentally prepared. Long Fu, refine it as soon as possible. Understood. Longao was very clear that after provoking Lu Changsheng this time, trouble would definitely come endlessly in the future. Just by relying on his current strength, it was not an easy task to deal with whatever came his way. If he could refine the Sword Demon's soul slave, he would be more secure when the time came. 36 Thunderbolt Styles. In the following days, Longao began to cultivate. The most important thing was to cultivate the 36 Thunderbolt Styles. Starting with his own Sword Dao, complementing with the Sword Demon's Sword Dao, and combining the 36 Thunderbolt Styles, it wasn't an easy task. Sword Pagoda. Someone spread the news that Black Wolf had entered the Sword Pagoda, causing the entire sword sect to be in an uproar. Everyone was guessing who this Black Wolf was. First, he was appointed as the sect's consecrator by the master. Now, he could enter the sword pagoda to cultivate. Could this person be related to the master? Moreover, the matter of Black Wolf consecrator killing 7 people was also left unsettled, causing everyone to feel a little uncomfortable. However, this matter was decided by the master and the great elder. No one dared to voice out their anger. Even if they felt uncomfortable, they could only swallow it down. In a secret chamber, Lu Changsheng, who had received the news, had an extremely gloomy expression. He punched the wall beside him and said angrily, "Sword pagoda, Black Wolf can actually cultivate in the sword pagoda. Elder, what should we do?" "H, don't think that you can live peacefully in the sword pagoda. I will let you know that you will die without a burial place if you enter the sword pagoda." As the law-enforcing elder of the sword sect, he had the power to arrange for a few people to enter the sword pagoda. He was very clear about Black Wolf's strength. He was a green-grade Great Emperor. If he sent a few purple-grade Great Emperors or black-grade Great Emperors, Black Wolf would definitely die. Ever since the previous incident, Longao had always thought that Lu Changsheng would find trouble with him. However, after 10 days, Lu Changsheng seemed to have disappeared from the face of the earth. Something was wrong. Based on Lu Changsheng's character, Longao knew very well that this matter was definitely not that simple. Could it be that Lu Changsheng wanted to deal with him in the sword pagoda? Others might not be able to do it, but Lu Changsheng, as the disciplinary elder of the sword sect, might be able to do it. Since they were about to enter the sword pagoda, Longao didn't continue to dwell on this issue. The forbidden grounds of the sword sect, the sword pagoda. There were many people watching from the surroundings. Although they couldn't enter the sword pagoda, these people still came to the sword pagoda every day. After all, the heaven and earth spiritual chi here was much denser than other places. Black Wolf is here. Here's the Black Wolf. Sigh, comparisons are odious. We are all stronger than him, but he can enter the sword pagoda to cultivate. Only we can't. What the hell is this? Sure, I have already heard that the relationship between the master and Black Wolf isn't simple. Think about it, how could an ordinary green-grade Great Emperor become a sect consecrator and enter the sword pagoda to cultivate? The sword pagoda had a rule that only black-grade Great Emperors and above could enter. Moreover, not everyone could enter. Ignoring the discussions around him, Longao came to the front of the sword pagoda. Looking at the 9-story sword pagoda, he was extremely excited. He wouldn't have known if he hadn't come, but now that he was here, he was shocked. Longao had already inquired about the sword pagoda. There were 9 floors in the sword pagoda. Every floor would bring endless benefits to one's cultivation. However, ordinary great sovereign martial artists, even titled great sovereign martial artists, could only reach the 7th floor at most. Only supreme Dao martial artists could reach the 8th floor and even the 9th floor. Only black-grade Great Emperors and above were qualified to enter the sword pagoda. Longao had already calculated. According to his strength, he wasn't qualified to enter the sword pagoda at all. Even if he were to enter the sword pagoda, it was still unknown whether he could even cultivate on the 1st floor, let alone go up to the higher floors. Black Wolf, I hope you can leave the sword pagoda alive. Hearing the voice, Longao sneered in his heart. There was no need for further guesses. Longao already knew that these people must have been sent by Lu Changsheng. It seemed like he would be in big trouble if he entered the sword pagoda. Without further hesitation, Longao finally took a step forward and entered the sword pagoda. The first step. As soon as he took the first step, Longao's expression changed slightly. No wonder it was the cultivation sacred ground of the sword sect. The aura on the 1st floor was very strong. If he was careless, the aura would invade his body, and the consequences would be unimaginable. At this moment, Longao finally knew why the sword sect didn't allow disciples to casually enter the sword pagoda. If a low-level Great Emperor martial artist entered the sword pagoda without permission, not only would he not gain any benefits, he might even be in danger. Longao didn't dare to be careless. After all, He was a green-grade great emperor martial artist. Even he couldn't withstand the aura. Firmament-devouring art. According to Long Fu, the aura in the sword pagoda was very mysterious and powerful. However, with the help of the firmament-devouring art, he could completely devour the aura in the sword pagoda. This way, not only could he cultivate with the help of the sword pagoda, he could also continuously refine the aura to increase his cultivation. Killing two birds with one stone, killing two birds with one stone. The entire first floor of the sword pagoda was boundless. At the very least, one couldn't see the end of it. It was shrouded in black mist. According to Yang every floor of the sword pagoda was divided into a grid. Everyone could occupy their own grid to cultivate. After all, the closer one was to the center, the more beneficial it would be for one's cultivation. In other words, if you occupied a grid to cultivate, it wouldn't be yours for the rest of your life. If there was someone stronger than you, they could challenge you. If you lost, you would have to give up your grid. If you won, you could continue to occupy your grid. This was the rule of the sword pagoda. Every floor of the sword pagoda had such a rule. After entering the sword pagoda, Longao used the firmament-devouring art to temporarily gain a foothold. However, he didn't continue to go deeper. This was because he wanted to understand the situation of the sword pagoda first. He was prepared to advance step by step. No matter what, he had just entered the sword pagoda and didn't know much about it. Eldest brother Xiong, second brother Xiong, and third brother Xiong. This time, Lu Changsheng had sent a total of 3 great emperors into the sword pagoda to deal with consecrator Black Wolf. Among the 3 Xiong brothers, the eldest was a gold-grade great emperor, the second was a white-grade great emperor, and the third was a black-grade great emperor. Such strength was more than enough to deal with a mere green-grade great emperor. The 3 Xiong brothers stepped into the sword pagoda and observed the surroundings. They were trying their best to find Black Wolf's whereabouts. However, the first floor of the sword pagoda was a little too big. It was almost impossible to find one person in an instant. Big brother, what should we do now? Split up and search. Remember, don't act recklessly after you find him. Chapter 10:20. The 3 Xiong brothers split up and tried their best to find Black Wolf's whereabouts. In their eyes, Black Wolf was already a turtle in a jar. Even if someone was killed in the sword pagoda, no one outside would know. Due to the uniqueness of the sword pagoda, Lu Changsheng wanted to eliminate Black Wolf within the sword pagoda without anyone knowing. Inside the sword pagoda, Longao found a grid in the outermost area, sat down cross-legged, and began cultivating. There was a black whirlpool behind him that was constantly devouring the surrounding aura. Longao was very curious. Although the aura within the sword pagoda was mysterious and powerful, it was still an exaggeration to call it a cultivation sacred ground. Could the secret of the sword pagoda be in the higher levels? Inside the dragon seal space. Have you sensed it? As soon as he stepped into the sword pagoda, Longao asked Long Fu to sense the secret of the sword pagoda. He knew very well that the sword pagoda wasn't as simple as it seemed to be, since it could become the cultivation sacred ground of the sword sect. Just as expected. Master, I have sensed it. The higher you go in the sword pagoda, the stronger the aura. After reaching the 7th floor, I believe it will be very beneficial for Master's cultivation. Hearing Long Fu's words, Longao was delighted. Long Fu, with my current strength, can I reach the 7th floor? This was what Longao was most concerned about. Master, don't worry. With my help and the help of the sword demon's soul slave, I believe Master will have no problem reaching the 9th floor, not to mention the 7th floor. All right. Since he knew that the first 6 floors were useless, Longao didn't stay any longer. He prepared to leave the 1st floor and head to the 2nd floor. You are Black Wolf. Looking at the burly young man in front of him, Longao nodded and said indifferently, yes, I am. I am Feng Hua. I am now officially challenging you. Do you dare to accept? A black-grade great emperor martial artist. According to the rules of the sword pagoda, one must be at least a black-grade great sovereign in order to cultivate in the sword pagoda. Otherwise, one would not be qualified to cultivate in the Sword Pagoda. Longao knew very well that Feng Hua had just entered the Sword Pagoda. After all, the lowest cultivation in the Sword Pagoda was a black-grade Great Emperor. With Longao's current strength, he was 2 levels away from the black-grade Great Emperor realm. Even if Longao had full confidence, it was still not an easy task to defeat a black-grade Great Emperor. As a martial artist, if he did not choose to accept a challenge, it would seem that he would be letting down his martial spirit. Under normal circumstances, even if Longao knew that he was no match for his opponent, he would still accept the challenge. Whether he won or lost was another matter, and whether he should stand or not was another matter. But now, the situation was completely different. Entering the Sword Pagoda this time could be said to be a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. If it could really help him break through his current realm, then everything else would be nonsense. I don't have time. I will accept the challenge later. Ha ha ha, so this is our sect's consecrator. What a load of crap. I really can't imagine why the sect would choose you as their consecrator. Trash, F***CK. Hearing the continuous insults from the other party, Longao cursed in his heart. He really couldn't understand why these so-called Super Forces disciples were so envious and jealous. However, Longao wasn't provoked into making a move because he knew very well that Lu Changsheng had already sent experts into the Sword Pagoda. They could find him at any time. Therefore, he had to rush to the higher levels of the Sword Pagoda with the fastest speed. Without paying attention to Feng Hua, Longao took a step forward and disappeared from his original spot. He shot towards the 2nd level of the Sword Pagoda. Looking at the disappearing figure, Feng Hua's face was filled with disdain. However, Feng Hua was very surprised because he really couldn't understand why Black Wolf could enter the Sword Pagoda when he was only a green-grade Great Emperor. According to the rules of the Sword Pagoda, only disciples who had broken through the black-grade Great Emperor realm were qualified to enter. Otherwise, low-level martial artists would be obliterated by the powerful aura of the Sword Pagoda. If that was the case, could it be that Black Wolf wasn't afraid of death? Seeing that Black Wolf had already entered the 2nd level of the Sword Pagoda, Feng Hua's expression became more and more surprised. Even a green-grade Great Emperor would be in danger if he entered the 1st level of the Sword Pagoda. He could be obliterated by the aura of the Sword Pagoda at any time, let alone the 2nd level. What was going on? Junior brother Feng Hua, have you seen Consecrator Black Wolf? Seeing the 3 Xiong brothers, Feng Hua naturally knew what they meant. The entire sword sect already knew that Black Wolf had provoked the Enforcement Elder as soon as he entered the sword sect. It was obvious that the Enforcement Elder wouldn't let Black Wolf go. He went to the 2nd level of the Sword Pagoda. Junior brother Feng Hua, are you mistaken? The 3 Xiong brothers didn't believe it at all. However, after thinking about it, they felt that Feng Hua didn't have to lie to them. Could it be that Black Wolf had really gone to the 2nd level of the Sword Pagoda? Seeing that the 3 Xiong brothers didn't believe it, Feng Hua smiled bitterly and said helplessly, "Let alone you guys, even I don't believe it." Under normal circumstances, Black Wolf wouldn't even be able to stay in the 1st level of the Sword Pagoda, let alone the 2nd level of the Sword Pagoda. It seems like this kid isn't simple. The 3 Xiong brothers nodded. They weren't fools. Of course, they knew what Feng Hua meant. If that was the case, then Black Wolf wasn't simple at all. No matter what, there hadn't been anyone who was personally consecrated by the Master in the history of the Sword Sect. According to my guess, if there aren't any accidents, Black Wolf must have a super powerful divine weapon to be able to stay in the Sword Pagoda and go to the 2nd level of the Sword Pagoda. No matter what, the Enforcement Elder has already ordered us to kill Black Wolf. Junior brother Feng Hua, are you willing to help? Help? Feng Hua was in a dilemma. He just wanted to challenge Black Wolf. From the beginning to the end, he didn't intend to kill Black Wolf. After all, Black Wolf was brought into the sword sect by the Master. Given the relationship between Black Wolf and the Master, if he was unlucky enough to kill Black Wolf and offend the Master, he would really go for wool and come home shorn. In Feng Hua's heart, the status of the Law Enforcement Elder and the Sect Master could not be compared at all. He would rather offend the law enforcement elder than the sect master. However, Feng Hua was very clear that if he dared to refuse, the law enforcement elder could easily kill him with his means and status. How should he choose? When the three Xiong brothers saw Feng Hua's expression, they had already guessed what he was thinking. The eldest Xiong brother chuckled and whispered, "Junior brother Feng Hua, I know what you're worried about. But think about it, with the enforcement elder's status, if you climb up this big tree, your future will be bright. As for the master, as long as you and I don't say anything, who will know? When the time comes, we'll kill Black Wolf without anyone knowing. P.S. There are still 3 chapters today. I'll update the remaining 2 later. Tomorrow, there will be 10 chapters. I'll update tomorrow at midnight. If you want to wait, you can wait a little longer and stay up late with Little 9. Chapter 10:21. Although eldest brother Xiong didn't finish his sentence, his meaning was clear. Since things had reached this stage, did Feng Hua have any other choice? He shrugged his shoulders helplessly. Feng Hua had no choice but to nod his head and agree. The 4 of them didn't stay on the first floor of the sword pagoda any longer. They flew towards the 2nd floor. The 9 floors of the sword pagoda pierced through the 9 heavens. From afar, the sword pagoda looked like it was floating above the clouds. On the peak of a mountain opposite the sword pagoda, the sword sect master, Murong Guena, and the great elder, Yi Xian, stood quietly on the peak of the mountain, allowing the breeze to blow past them. Master, Longao is only a green great emperor. If he forcefully enters the sword pagoda, I'm afraid he will be injured by the sword chi. Yi Xian didn't finish his sentence. Yi Xian actually wanted to say that with Longao's strength, if he forcefully entered the sword pagoda, not only would he be injured by the sword chi, he might even be killed by the sword chi. After all, the rules of the sword pagoda were there. Even the 2 of them couldn't change the rules of the sword pagoda. Murong Guena's expression was grave. How could he not know what Yi Xian said? Elder Yi Xian, do you know about the 10,000-year catastrophe of the dragon race and the Long family? Yi Xian nodded. Although the 10,000-year catastrophe of the Long family and the dragon race was a secret, it was something that everyone in the upper echelons of the Sky Martial continent knew about. Yi Xian didn't know what the master meant. Could it be that Longao was related to the 10,000-year catastrophe of the Long family? I have already met with Long Ditian. According to him, Longao is the key to the 10,000-year catastrophe. Hearing this, Yi Xian was a little shocked. I guess that Longao's identity isn't simple. Therefore, we have to build a good relationship with Longao and help him. If he can really change the situation of the Sky Martial continent in the future, we will have the upper hand. So that was the case. Yi Xian finally understood what his master meant and said, "Master, I know what to do." Next. Murong Guena and Yi Xian didn't say anything else. The peak of the mountain fell silent once more. A light breeze blew past, causing their hair to flutter. Who would have thought that the 2 strongest people of the Martial Heaven continent would be standing at the peak of the mountain, waiting for someone to come out of the sword tower? From the beginning to the end, Yi Xian didn't ask if Longao could persevere in the sword pagoda with his strength. Murong Guena didn't say anything because even he didn't know if Longao could survive in the sword pagoda. According to the rules of the sword pagoda, one had to be at least a black-grade great sovereign to enter and cultivate. According to the previous rules, green-grade great sovereigns would definitely die if they forcefully entered the sword pagoda. Within the sword pagoda, when Longao entered the 2nd floor, he realized that the aura on the 2nd floor was twice as strong as the aura on the 1st floor. Don't underestimate this. Longao was very clear that even a black-grade great sovereign would have to be careful when dealing with it. Otherwise, the aura could invade their body at any time and cause them to die without a burial ground. The space on the 2nd floor of the sword pagoda was obviously inferior to the space on the 1st floor. There were obviously fewer sword grids. Longao didn't linger on the 2nd floor of the sword pagoda. As soon as he stepped into the 2nd floor, he immediately shot towards the 3rd floor. The 3 Seong brothers and the 4 fire beacon experts who followed him saw Black Wolf's figure disappear as soon as they stepped into the 2nd floor. He was actually shooting towards the 3rd floor. The 4 of them looked at each other, not knowing what Black Wolf was trying to do. According to Black Wolf's strength, it was already difficult for him to enter the 1st floor of the Sword Pagoda. If he entered the 2nd floor, his life would be in danger at any time, let alone the 3rd floor. Is there something wrong with Black Wolf's brain? With his strength, he will definitely die once he enters the 3rd floor of the Sword Pagoda. I am now even more certain that Black Wolf must have a powerful divine weapon on him that can withstand the aura attacks here. Remember, no matter who kills Black Wolf, they will be able to obtain the divine weapon on him. Hearing eldest brother Seong's words, greed instantly appeared on the faces of the other 3. Being able to withstand the aura attacks of the Sword Pagoda meant that once they obtained the divine weapon, they would be able to enter the higher floors of the Sword Pagoda to cultivate. This was simply a dream for swordsmen. Let's go. Since things had already reached this stage, the 4 of them could only choose to continue following. Both parties only had one destination, and that was the 3rd floor of the Sword Pagoda. The 3rd floor of the Sword Pagoda. Just when Longao stepped into the 3rd floor and the 4 of them thought that Longao would stop, a shocking scene occurred. Longao did not stop at all and continued towards the 4th floor of the Sword Pagoda. The 4 of them were completely stunned when they saw Black Wolf continue towards the 4th floor of the Sword Pagoda. They did not know whether Black Wolf was too arrogant or not. The 5th floor of the Sword Pagoda. With the strength of 3rd brother Seong and Fire Beacon, they could only go up to the 4th floor at most. It was impossible for them to enter the 5th floor. If they forced their way up, there would only be one outcome, being obliterated by the aura. However, Longao did not stop after reaching the 5th floor of the Sword Pagoda. He continued towards the 6th floor of the Sword Pagoda. This time, even eldest brother Seong did not know what to do. Because with the strength of 2nd brother Seong, he could only stay on the 5th floor of the Sword Pagoda. As for eldest brother Seong, he could only go up to the 6th floor and could not stay for long. At most, he would be attacked by the aura in a few minutes. The consequences would be unimaginable. Looking at the gradually disappearing figure, eldest brother Seong's face was extremely gloomy and unsightly. Black Wolf, don't think that you can live to 100 years old just because you can reach the higher floors of the Sword Pagoda. I will let you know the consequences of offending the law-enforcing elder. Eldest brother Seong's intention was very clear. He wanted to give up on pursuing Black Wolf because even with his strength, he could not stay on the 6th floor of the Sword Pagoda for long. He could only meet up with the other 3 and guard the Sword Pagoda. There was only one exit in the Sword Pagoda. Unless Black Wolf did not come out for the rest of his life, Black Wolf would definitely die if he was intercepted by them. Eldest brother Seong and the other 3 were very confident. A gold grade Great Emperor, a white grade Great Emperor, and 2 black grade Great Emperors. If the 4 of them worked together, even a white grade Great Emperor might not be able to survive, let alone a mere green grade Great Emperor. Just like this, the 4 of them did not continue their pursuit. Instead, they stood guard at the exit of the Sword Pagoda, preparing to wait for the rabbit to come out. How could Longao not know what the 4 of them were doing? However, at this moment, Longao did not dwell on this matter. He had successfully passed the 6th floor and would reach the 7th floor of the Sword Pagoda soon. According to the rules of the Sword Pagoda, only titled warriors and above could enter the 7th floor of the Sword Pagoda to cultivate. If it wasn't for the firmament-devouring art and Long Fu's help, Longao knew very well that he would not be able to reach the 7th floor of the Sword Pagoda. Chapter 1022. On the 7th floor of the Sword Pagoda. As soon as Longao arrived on the 7th floor of the Sword Pagoda, he felt countless sword chi rushing towards him. He wasn't surprised at all. Before entering the Sword Pagoda, he already knew that once he went up to the 7th floor, he would be attacked by the sword chi. He didn't continue to use the celestial devouring skill. Longao used the sword chi to fight against the sword chi. The god-killing sword in his hand continuously used the Emperor Dragon's 9 kills and the Thunderbolt 36 styles that he had just comprehended. It had to be said. The sword pagoda was indeed a good place to cultivate. The sword chi on the 7th floor alone was far better than the sword demon's cave abode. Such a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, how could Longao easily give up? That was precisely the reason. Longao didn't continue to go to the 8th floor of the sword pagoda. Instead, he stayed on the 7th floor temporarily, preparing to use the sword chi to attack and continue to test his sword principle. On the 7th floor of the sword pagoda, the sword chi roared and swept across the entire space. The entire space on the 7th floor of the sword pagoda became extremely violent and was filled with sharp sword chi. The sword chi became more and more powerful. The entire space was even shrouded by the sword chi, and the surrounding sword guards also disappeared. The sword chi emitted a sword sound that constantly resounded throughout the entire space. The sword chi was everywhere. In just a few seconds, Longao's body was already covered with countless wounds of various sizes. Longao wasn't afraid at all. Instead, he became braver as he fought. The god-killing sword in his hand was also moving faster and faster. Even the shadow of the sword couldn't be seen. At this moment, Longao seemed to have forgotten everything and began to gradually enter his own world of sword Dao. Attack, defense. Longao was unable to resist at the beginning and began to slowly verify his own sword Dao. If anyone saw Longao counterattacking the sword chi, they would definitely think that he was out of his mind and didn't want to live anymore. In all directions, countless sword chi attacked Longao, but Longao counterattacked with the help of the god-killing sword's sword chi at an even faster speed. Under the endless cycle, the entire space was filled with sword chi. It was extremely terrifying. Master, try to devour the sword chi. Devour the sword chi? Hearing Long Fu's words, Longao was shocked. After a few minutes of counterattacking sword chi, he had begun to slowly verify his sword Dao. Longao knew very well that if he continued like this, he would have a small achievement in his sword Dao in 3 days at most. But even so, he still had to be careful and stay alert. Because at this moment, Longao was already riddled with injuries. If he relaxed in the slightest, he would be instantly sliced into 18 pieces by the countless sword chi that shot over from all directions, dying a tragic death. If he forcefully devoured the sword chi, wouldn't he be courting death? If it were anyone else, even if they were given 10,000 guts, they wouldn't dare to casually devour the sword chi. However, Longao believed in Long Fu. Firmament devouring art. Longao circulated the firmament devouring art and a huge black vortex appeared behind him. Longao circulated the firmament devouring art to the extreme. His whole body was drenched in sweat and his breathing was rapid. However, he didn't dare to relax in the slightest. The god-killing sword in his hand was still brandishing, and countless sword chi flew back and forth. It was a spectacular sight. As Longao continued to devour the sword chi that Longao swung out had unknowingly increased from the initial 3 feet to 3 feet, and even to 300 feet. In the end, the sword chi was 100 feet long. It could only be described with 3 words: too powerful. This sword move penetrated the heavens and the earth, as if tens of thousands of swords had been shot out at the same time. The sword chi even tore the space apart, and the sword chime was abnormally terrifying. It was like thunder from the 9th heaven, rumbling non-stop. Longao was also extremely shocked. This was because Longao had never thought that using the firmament-devouring art to continuously devour the sword chi around him could achieve such an effect. Although his cultivation realm didn't increase at all, his comprehension of the sword principle and the sword chi that he wielded had increased by hundreds of times. Longao was very clear that with his current strength, even if he were to fight against a blue-grade Great Emperor Sword Expert or a purple-grade Great Emperor Sword Expert, he wouldn't have the slightest fear. Just the sword chi that was 100 feet long was an existence that not everyone could contend against. Let's try. Longao took 3 steps back and roared fiercely. With a swing of his sword, the sword chi that was 100 feet long was already unleashed. Wherever the sword chi passed, There would be cries of ghosts and howls of wolves. The sword chime was roaring, and it was like a storm that swept across the heavens and earth. Longao had never seen such a powerful scene before. Master, quickly integrate the force that you have comprehended into the sword chi. Hearing Long Fu's urgent voice, Longao didn't dare to be careless. Force was a powerful aura that martial artists condensed. Among all the forces, the force of heaven and earth was the most powerful existence. It was also the aura that only Nirvana realm martial artists possessed. Longao was very clear that he was lucky. Back then, he had inadvertently condensed the force of heaven and earth. However, it could only suppress the opponent's force of heaven and earth. Even if it was a Supreme Dao martial artist, it was almost impossible to kill him with the force of heaven and earth. However, the force of heaven and earth didn't seem to have any other uses besides this. That was exactly the case. Longao found it hard to imagine. If he were to integrate the force into the sword chi, what use would it be even if the integration was successful? It seemed to be able to guess his master's thoughts. Master, once you integrate the force into the sword chi, it will form a powerful sword force. At that time, even if you encounter a blue-grade Great Emperor martial artist, you can easily kill him with the power of the sword force. Hearing Long Fu's words, Longao was shocked. It was impossible to say that he wasn't greedy. Longao was looking forward to it. He was looking forward to fusing his force and forming his own sword force. The force that Longao possessed was different from the others. The force of heaven and earth had a great advantage. Once the integration was successful, the sword force that Longao had condensed would be extraordinary. Break. With a loud roar, Longao swung his sword again. This sword seemed to be able to destroy everything. It was an irresistible force. It instantly slashed across the entire space. Longao could even hear screams. He didn't dare to stay any longer and shot towards the 8th floor of the sword pagoda. Motherf asterisk Kerr, who ambushed me? Motherf asterisk Kerr. Who is it? As soon as Longao's sword force disappeared, countless curses could be heard from the surroundings. On the 7th floor of the sword pagoda, there were at least a few dozen people cultivating at the same time. Some of them had even reached the most crucial moment. However, after being swept by the sword, everything was over. Everyone was furious. Curses, and more curses resounded throughout the entire 7th floor of the sword pagoda. However, no matter what, no one stood out to admit it. In this way, no one would casually find trouble. After all, those who could reach the 7th floor of the sword pagoda were all titled Great Emperors. If these titled Great Emperors knew that the person who had just released the sword force wasn't an expert, but a green-grade Great Emperor martial artist who had just entered the sword pagoda, what would they think? P.S. 10 chapters will be released tomorrow, starting at midnight. Chapter 1023. At the entrance to the 8th floor of the sword pagoda. Master, the 8th floor of the sword pagoda is a little different. Have you thought about it? Longao stood quietly at the entrance. He knew very well what kind of place the 8th floor of the sword pagoda was if even Long Fu was so solemn. The 8th floor of the sword pagoda was full of danger. The purpose of entering the sword pagoda was to cultivate. Because of this, Longao had decided that even if there was a mountain of swords and a sea of flames in front of him, he would rush forward without hesitation. Long Fu, let's go. Long Fu had already guessed that his master would definitely enter the 8th floor of the sword pagoda. This was his master's character. The 8th floor of the sword pagoda was very quiet. There were only 100 sword compartments on the entire 8th floor of the sword pagoda. In other words, only 100 people could enter the 8th floor of the sword pagoda to cultivate. Moreover, they were all Supreme Dao warriors and the weakest of them was at the virtual god realm. Under normal circumstances, even if the 100 sword compartments on the 8th floor of the sword pagoda were not overcrowded, they would at least occupy 95% of the space. But now, something was wrong. There must be something fishy. Looking at the 8th floor of the sword pagoda, Longao focused his attention and observed the surroundings. After repeated confirmation, he was sure that there was no one in the 100 sword compartments on the 8th floor of the sword pagoda. Something was very wrong. Long Fu, what did you sense? Master, if I'm not mistaken, this should be the doing of the sword sect master. Sword sect master Murong Guenar? Although he did not know what Murong Guenar wanted, Longao did not let go of this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. According to Long Fu, the secrets of the sword pagoda were actually on the 8th and 9th floor. Now that he had arrived at the 8th floor, other than the silence, there did not seem to be anything wrong. Hiss, hiss, hiss. The roar of the sword chi rang out. Before Longao could react, countless sword chi had already appeared in the surroundings. The hundreds of sword grids that were still there just now suddenly disappeared. Longao realized that he had disappeared from the 8th floor of the sword pagoda and appeared in a large space. After being attacked by countless sword chi, Longao knew that the 8th floor of the sword chi was actually an illusory formation. If it were others, they might not know. But regarding the Tao of array formations, Longao still had some understanding. He did not dare to be careless. The God-punishing sword in Longao's hand slashed out with a backhand slash. A 300-meter-long sword chi followed the momentum, and the powerful sword chi formed a sword chi barrier around Longao. The countless sword chi in the surroundings automatically disappeared when they touched the sword chi barrier. Longao was very clear that if the 8th floor of the sword pagoda was just an illusory array, then it would be too inferior. It would be inferior to the 7th floor of the sword pagoda. The purple and white figures flickered, and then violet spirit and white spirit appeared in the sword chi space. They were curious. Since they entered the sword sect, violet spirit and whitey rarely made an appearance because they were afraid of being noticed. But at this moment, they'd actually made an appearance at the 8th level of the sword pagoda. Could it be that they're not afraid of being noticed by experts in the sword Tao? Bai Ling, you? Bai Ling was surprised and said, Young Master Long, there are many Genling in this sword chi space. If my sister and I can devour these Genling, it will be of great help to our recovery. Genling. Longao knew very well what Genling meant. If a Genling appeared in another place, it might be a problem. But this was the sword sect, the sacred cultivation ground of the sword sect. It was not strange for a Genling to appear here. Do as you please. At this point, Longao certainly hoped that the two Genling could devour the Genling around them. If the two Genling could recover to their peak state, it would be of great benefit to him. Why not do it when it would benefit others and himself? Longao, don't think that we are using you. We will choose the right Genling for you to devour. I can guarantee that if you devour these Genling, even if you can't improve your realm, your comprehension of sword principles, sword chi, and sword momentum will skyrocket. Thank you. It would be a lie if he said that he was not happy. In the following time, Xiling and Bai Ling began to search for Genling around them. As for the sword chi, it seemed to have no effect on Xiling and Bai Ling. Moreover, the sword chi around them did not actively attack the two Genling. Longao felt helpless. Comparisons were odious. Even if the two Genling's strength had not recovered to their peak state, the sword chi would not be able to resist them easily. Longao's sword chi continued to destroy the sword chi around them. Longao's comprehension of sword principles was not the same as before. With the addition of the sword chi and the powerful sword momentum, he believed that he could even kill a blue-grade Great Emperor with a single strike. Xiling and Bai Ling had already gone to search for the other Genling. Longao certainly would not waste his time. Other than continuing to comprehend sword principles and condensing sword momentum, Longao began to merge the 36 Thunderbolt forms and the Emperor Dragon's 9 kills. Whether it was the 36 Thunderbolt forms or the Emperor Dragon's 9 kills, they were considered the most powerful sword techniques. If he could merge the two sword techniques, the power would not be as simple as 1+1. Longao was very clear that if he merged them in other places, it would be extremely difficult to condense the Emperor Dragon's 9 kills and the 36 Thunderbolt forms. However, in the sword chi space of the 8th floor of the sword pagoda, the speed of fusion would be greatly reduced. Because of this, Longao did not let go of such a rare opportunity and began to condense them. A dragon's roar could be heard, one dragon's roar after another. A total of 9 dragons' roar overlapped and the 36 thunderbolt forms permeated within the dragon's roar. The sound of thunder mixed with the dragon's roar resounded throughout the entire sword chi space. 1 failure, 2 failures, 3 failures, 4 failures, 5 failures. Until the 37th time, he still failed. Longao was extremely depressed. Why couldn't he condense them successfully? Was there something wrong? Or rather, the two sword techniques could not be merged at all. Master, try using the sword momentum as a link and see if you can fuse the Emperor Dragon's 9 kills and the 36 Thunderbolt forms. The 36 Thunderbolt forms and the Emperor Dragon's 9 kills were both comprehended by Longao himself. They could be considered as sword techniques created by Longao himself. Under normal circumstances, Longao should be able to fuse the two sword techniques very smoothly. But what was the result? Sword momentum. There was no other way. If the fusion was not successful now, once the opportunity was missed, who knew if there would be such an opportunity in the future? It was precisely because of this that Longao had no choice but to use the sword momentum as a link and begin to fuse the Emperor Dragon's 9 kills and the 36 Thunderbolt forms. Sure enough. Just as Long Fu had said, the sword momentum was the key to fusing the two super sword techniques. Gradually, Longao discovered that the two sword techniques were slowly fusing together. Chapter 1024. With the sword force as the link, the two sword techniques had completely merged within an hour. Dragon roars. Thunder. They intertwined and resounded in the sword chi space. Longao swung the deity-slaying sword in his hand. 100 Zhonglong sword chi struck down fiercely like the 9 heavens thunder. Young Master Long, congratulations. Longao nodded with a smile and asked, have you found the Genling? Yes, we have found 85% of the Genling. We don't have enough time for the remaining Genling. Sister has already said that she will help you refine 10 Genling. With the two of us working together, I believe that you will be able to refine 10 Genling completely within an hour. He was a little surprised. Longao knew what Bailing meant. If they didn't help him, they could have found all the remaining Genling and devoured them. However, Xiling and Bailing didn't do that in the end. What was the reason? He didn't continue to thank them. Everything was in silence. Longao sat on the ground. With 2 Genling guarding him, Longao wasn't worried at all. In an instant, Longao felt the power of the 10 sword chi entering his body, entering every part of his body through his 8 extraordinary meridians, then entering his dantian and gathering in one place. This was the Genling. Longao knew clearly that with his strength, he would need a long time to refine 10 Genling. However, with the help of Xiling and Bailing, the time needed was greatly reduced. Moreover, it was easier to refine the Genling. An hour later, Longao opened his eyes abruptly. There was an unconcealable joy on his face. In just an hour, his cultivation base had broken through from the peak green grade Great Emperor realm to the peak blue grade Great Emperor realm. It was a whole level increase. In just a few months, Longao had broken through from the Saint Emperor realm to the blue grade Great Emperor realm. If this kind of cultivation speed was spread out, no one would believe it. Such a cultivation speed was too terrifying. 10 Genlings worth of strength and you only managed to break through by one level. Isn't that a bit too much? Xiling sighed. According to Xiling and Bailing's speculation, once Longao devoured 10 Genling's energy, he would be able to break through to the purple grade Great Emperor realm or even the black grade Great Emperor realm. According to Xiling's original plan, Longao could easily break through to the gold grade Great Emperor realm with their help after devouring 10 Genling. He was only one step away from becoming a titled Great Emperor. Longao was also a little surprised. Judging from Xiling's expression and Xiling's words, it would be a waste of 10 Genling's energy to break through to the blue-grade Great Sovereign Realm. Could it be because of the Saint Body of Desolation? What Longao thought, Xiling and Bai Ling also thought of the same thing. Sister, I forgot to tell you that young Master Long has the Saint Desolation physique. He needs a huge amount of energy. 10 Genling can only break through by 1 level. According to my calculations, if you want young Master Long to break through to the Gold Grade Great Emperor realm, you need at least 1,000 Genlings worth of energy. Xiling nodded and said helplessly, Longao, you're unlucky to have the Saint Desolation physique. You could have broken through to the Gold Grade Great Emperor realm, but you can only break through by 1 level. He shrugged his shoulders helplessly. Although Longao was a little disappointed, he wasn't that ambitious. To be able to break through by 1 level in just an hour was already super awesome. Longao knew very well that to be able to break through by so many levels in just a few months, who else in the Sky Martial continent could do that? The Saint Desolation physique had its advantages and disadvantages. The Saint Desolation physique was known as the #1 cultivation saint physique in the world. At the same time, it was also known as the #1 trash physique in the world. This was because the Saint Desolation physique required a huge amount of energy to break through quickly. Without a huge amount of energy, the cultivation speed would be like trash. Longao was like that in the past. He didn't break through for 10 whole years and was known as the #1 trash in the Scarlet Fire Town. The biggest advantage of the Saint Desolation physique was that it didn't have any bottlenecks. As long as there was enough energy, it would naturally break through the bottleneck. This was the most powerful physique. You should know about the Saint Desolation physique. The reason why my cultivation speed is so fast is because I have the Saint Desolation physique. Longao, if you want to continue breaking through, you have to enter the 9th level of the Sword Pagoda. How could Longao not know what Xiling was talking about? Violet Spirit, the 9th floor of the Sword Pagoda. According to Yang the 8th and 9th floors of the Sword Pagoda are the true sacred cultivation grounds of the Sword Pagoda. If the 8th floor of the Sword Pagoda we're on is just a sword aura space, it's a little strange. Sister, please help young Master Long. Xiling suddenly emitted a powerful sword chi aura. Together with Bai Ling and Longao, they disappeared from the sword chi space. In a flash, Longao returned to the 8th level of the Sword Pagoda. On the 8th level of the Sword Pagoda, there were more than 100 sword guards sitting and cultivating. They occupied 90% of the sword guards. Could the secret be in the sword guards? Longao didn't hesitate at all. He immediately found an empty sword guard and sat on the ground to see what the secret of the 8th level of the Sword Pagoda was. A supreme Dao swordsman? As soon as Longao sat down, he already knew the secret of the 8th level of the Sword Pagoda. It turned out that once one entered the 8th level of the Sword Pagoda and found a sword guard, the sword path that the Supreme Dao Swordsman had comprehended would appear on the sword. With the sword path, one could reproduce their own sword Dao or walk on the path of their own sword Dao. This was very useful for a sword Dao warrior. Every warrior wanted to comprehend the sword Dao, no matter what method it was. The 8th level of the Sword Pagoda might be useful to others, but it wasn't very useful to Longao. Longao had not only comprehended his own sword Dao, but he had also produced his own sword Qi and comprehended Sword Demon's sword Dao. How many people in the Sword Sect and the entire Tianwu continent could surpass Sword Demon in terms of sword Dao comprehension? Longao, who had just sat on the ground, stood up again. He couldn't continue to stay on the 8th level of the Sword Pagoda. He directly flew to the 9th level of the Sword Pagoda. Longao, I have to remind you that the 9th level of the Sword Pagoda is very dangerous. You'd better be prepared. Even my sister and I won't be able to help you when the time comes. You'll have to rely on yourself. Longao had personally experienced the dangers of the 8th level of the Sword Pagoda. If the 8th level was already so dangerous, then the 9th level was even more so. Was he going to give up just like that? I'll deal with it myself. This was Longao's character. Even if the 9th level of the Sword Pagoda was a mountain of blades and a sea of flames, he would still try. After all, he had already come this far. Whether he lived or died, his fate was up to him. Longao had never believed in fate. Chapter 1025. Outside the Sword Pagoda. In the blink of an eye, 3 days had passed. Although the enforcement elder, Lu Changsheng, didn't enter the Sword Pagoda, he had been guarding a hidden spot outside the Sword Pagoda. Under normal circumstances, with Black Wolf's strength, the 4 people he sent out should be more than enough to kill Black Wolf. However, as time passed, Lu Changsheng's confidence grew. He clenched his fists tightly. At this moment, Boss Yong suddenly appeared and walked towards Lu Changsheng. "How's the matter? Elder, it's hard to imagine that Black Wolf not only entered the first level of the Sword Pagoda, but also went straight to the 7th level. I couldn't chase after him, so I could only choose to give up temporarily. The 7th level of the Sword Pagoda? With Black Wolf's strength, how could he reach the 7th level of the Sword Pagoda?" Lu Changsheng definitely wouldn't believe it, but he was very clear that Boss Yong wouldn't dare to lie to him. If it wasn't his own people who reported this, he wouldn't believe it even if he was beaten to death. "Elder, what's the matter with Black Wolf?" After thinking for a while, Lu Changsheng said with uncertainty, "There are only 2 reasons why Black Wolf could reach the 7th level of the Sword Pagoda." Boss Yong stood on the spot respectfully. In front of the enforcement elder, he didn't have the right to speak. 10 sides stood like a tripod, and their status was strict. Unless Black Wolf has a powerful divine weapon, there's only one reason. Black Wolf has the help of the Master. Otherwise, with Black Wolf's strength, he wouldn't be able to reach the 7th level of the Sword Pagoda. The rules of the Sword Pagoda. Only black-grade Great Emperors could enter the Sword Pagoda to cultivate. In order to enter the 7th level of the Sword Pagoda and comprehend the Sword Dao, one had to be a titled Great Emperor. But what about Black Wolf? Black Wolf was only a green-grade Great Emperor. He was too far away from a titled Great Emperor. "Elder, what should we do now? I don't believe that Black Wolf won't leave the Sword Pagoda for the rest of his life. So what if he has the help of the Master? The 3 of you guard the exit. As soon as you see Black Wolf, challenge him immediately. After you kill him, say that it was an accident. I will take care of the rest. I know what to do." Big Boss Xiong immediately turned around and returned to the Sword Pagoda. Staring at the Sword Pagoda in the distance, Lu Changsheng sneered and muttered to himself, "Black Wolf, I will let you know the consequences of provoking me, even if you have the Master's protection." Ha ha ha. Opposite the Sword Pagoda, at the peak of the mountain. For 3 whole days, Murong Guena and Yi Xian still did not leave. The 2 of them were also waiting for Longao to appear because according to Longao's strength, he wasn't qualified to enter the Sword Pagoda. It was precisely because of this. The 2 of them were looking forward to Longao's performance. They wanted to see if he could leave the Sword Pagoda and what he obtained in the Sword Pagoda. "Master, I just received news that Longao has entered the 9th level of the Sword Pagoda." Hearing this, Murong Guena laughed. Although he was a little surprised, it was within his expectations because he knew what kind of person Longao was. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to enter the Tianwu continent alone and cause so much trouble. "Master, I am really curious. How did Longao reach the 9th level of the Sword Pagoda?" Murong Guena waved his hand and stopped Yi Xian from continuing. "Longao isn't simple. It seems like what Long Di Tian said was true. The 9th level of the Sword Pagoda really surprised me. He was actually able to reach the 8th level of the Sword Pagoda." Both Murong Guena and Yi Xian knew what the 8th level of the Sword Pagoda meant. Not to mention a green-grade Great Emperor, even a supreme Dao martial artist might not be able to smoothly comprehend it. "Master, the secret of the 9th level of the Sword Pagoda. If Longao can obtain it, it will be a gift from me. I know Longao's character very well. If you respect him, he will respect you 10 times. I believe that Longao will be useful to our sword sect in the future. You can't trap a wolf without sacrificing a child." Although he knew what the Master meant, Yi Xian still felt a little uncomfortable in his heart. The secret of the 9th level of the Sword Pagoda was only known to the higher-ups of the sword sect. After so many years, no one had obtained it. It would be a pain in the ass to let Longao have it. Elder Yi Xian, I know what you are thinking. Yi Xian didn't say anything, but the unwillingness on his face was obvious. Not to mention Murong Guenar, even a fool could see Yi Xian's unhappiness. Yi Xian smiled. Murong Guenar didn't mind and said, countless people want to obtain the secret of the 9th level of the Sword Pagoda. However, after so many years, other than the old ancestor sword demon, no one has obtained it. It is still unknown whether Longao can obtain it. Master, forgive me for being blunt. Longao is ultimately not a disciple of our sword sect. Even if he can obtain the secret of the 9th level of the Sword Pagoda, I believe it will be difficult to convince the masses. How could Murong Guenar not know what Yi Xian meant? Elder Yi Xian, you still haven't seen through it. The situation of the continent will change in the future. If our sword sect can survive, what's the harm in giving the secret of the 9th level of the Sword Pagoda to Longao? Before Yi Xian could speak, Murong Guenar continued, you reap what you sow. When you truly comprehend it, you will reach my realm. Yi Xian's body trembled when he heard this. For so many years, he had been bitterly trying to break through the bottleneck and reach the master's realm. He had thought of countless methods, but he still couldn't do it. Just as the master had said, he had seen through everything. At this moment, Yi Xian seemed to have gained a bit of enlightenment. He stood quietly at the peak of the mountain and slowly closed his eyes. His entire being entered a mysterious state. To Yi Xian, this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, something that could only be encountered by chance. Epiphany, be it for martial artists or swordsmen, was something they yearned for even in their dreams. Murong Guenar naturally felt that something was wrong with Yi Xian. When he realized that Yi Xian had an epiphany, he was pleasantly surprised. Murong Guenar never expected that Elder Yi Xian would have an epiphany at this moment. If Yi Xian was lucky and broke through the bottleneck, wouldn't it mean that the sword sect would have another super expert? This was great news for the sword sect. Elder Yi Xian, let me lend you a hand. Murong Guenar emitted a terrifying aura that directly entered Yi Xian's body. If it was an ordinary person who had an epiphany, no one would forcefully help them. Not only would there be no benefits, but they might even end up losing the bait. However, Murong Guenar's situation was different. With his strength, would anyone else be able to do it? Without a doubt, with Murong Guenar's help, whether Yi Xian could break through the bottleneck would depend on his own fortune. Chapter 1026. The 9th floor of the Sword Pagoda. The 9th floor of the Sword Pagoda was an average-sized room. Looking around, Longao was very curious. It was very different from the 9th floor of the Sword Pagoda that he had imagined. Long Fu, is there something wrong with the 9th floor? Master, I didn't sense it before, but I have an intuition that this Sword Pagoda is definitely not simple. The secret is on the 9th floor. Here. Hearing Long Fu's affirmation, Longao was even more surprised because Long Fu's intuition was usually correct. He shrugged helplessly. Longao began to carefully observe the surrounding environment to find the secret of the 9th floor of the Sword Pagoda. The entire room, which was the so-called 9th floor of the Sword Pagoda, was empty except for a painting on the wall and simple furniture. He came to the painting. There was only one person in the painting. He was holding a sharp sword and looking down at the 9 heavens with contempt. He stared at the mural in front of him. Unknowingly, Longao's soul was instantly sucked into the mural. As for his body, it continued to stay in the room. The 9th floor of the Sword Pagoda. It was very difficult for anyone to enter the 9th floor of the Sword Pagoda, and it was very difficult for anyone to find the secret of the 9th floor of the Sword Pagoda. It was fate that Longao could successfully enter the 9th floor of the Sword Pagoda from the 8th floor of the Sword Pagoda. This was also why Murong Guenar was looking forward to Longao being able to find the secret of the 9th floor of the Sword Pagoda. In the mural, Longao's soul was sucked in by a powerful force, and he didn't even have the chance to react. He was startled. Before Longao could figure out what had happened, a white light flashed and he was standing firmly in a strange world. There was sky, earth, sun, moon, mountains, water, and airflow. The entire world was filled with a terrifying and unparalleled sword chi. Longao stood in the void and looked around, not knowing where he was. He was unable to sense Long Fu's presence, and similarly, he was unable to sense Zi Ling and Bai Ling's presence. What the hell is going on? Right at this moment, a terrifying lightning bolt flashed across the world. It was at least 1,000 feet long. With a cracking sound, the entire world seemed to have been split apart by the lightning bolt. A silhouette flashed and the burly man appeared in the 9 heavens, holding a gigantic sword in his hand. One man and one sword, standing tall in the 9 heavens. Murals. Looking at the man and sword that suddenly appeared, Longao realized that they were exactly the same as the paintings on the wall. Jian Tian, do you really think that you can fight against Tian Dao? Above the 9 heavens, a giant face appeared. Others might not recognize this giant face, but it was impossible for Longao not to recognize it. The giant face was none other than Tian Dao, the #1 expert in the world. He was also a martial artist who had truly stepped into the peak of martial arts. Sword Heaven? Who was it? Ha ha ha, Heavenly Dao? The heavens have already lost their Dao. Why should I serve the heavens? Heavenly Dao, today, I, Jian Tian, will personally destroy you. Ha ha ha. Jian Tian, you overestimate yourself just like Long Tian. Since that's the case, I will let you know that the dignity of the Heavenly Dao is not to be offended. The dignity of the Heavenly Dao pressed down heavily. The sword in Jian Tian's hand slashed out. Wherever the sword chi passed, the entire space would crack. Rumbling sounds of thunder and sword chi could be heard continuously. The trajectory of the sword Dao and the sword force were unhindered. Longao did not let go of this rare opportunity. He immediately started to comprehend Jian Tian's sword Dao and sword force. However, Longao had always focused on his own sword Dao. Whether it was Sword Demon's sword Dao or Jian Tian's sword Dao and sword force, they were all supplementary. This was something that would never change no matter what. Overestimating yourself. A contemptuous smile appeared on the giant face, as if it did not put the other party in its eyes at all. This was the way of the heavens. No matter what, the way of the heavens was powerful. Unless the oracle came in person, who else could be a match for the way of the heavens? Flipping his hand, he could summon clouds and rain. All of a sudden, the giant face stretched out a huge palm. With a flip of the clouds and rain, the sword force released by Jian Tian was destroyed and disappeared without a trace. Jian Tian's face was extremely solemn. This was because he knew that with his strength, as long as he did not integrate with the origin energy and break through to the final realm, he would not be able to go against the Heavenly Dao. However, things had already come to this point. Even if he knew that it was impossible, he still rushed forward without hesitation. One had to admit that Jian Tian and Long Tian's characters were very similar. They were both reckless. Sometimes, showing off might not be a good thing. Longao realized that neither the Heavenly Dao nor Jian Tian seemed to be able to see him. He, who was initially worried, heaved a sigh of relief. Heavenly Dao, take my sword. Before Jian Tian could strike, the giant face disappeared and the Heavenly Dao's figure appeared. His strength was not comparable to his clone. Crack. The aura suppressed Jian Tian, which was also the suppression of the origin energy. Jian Tian's body was crushed into pieces. He did not even have the chance to fight back. This was the strength of the Heavenly Dao. Even Jian Tian's strength could not go against the Heavenly Dao. Jian Tian was obliterated and the Heavenly Dao disappeared. Looking at everything that happened in front of him, Longao was a little dumbfounded. From the beginning to the end, he did not know what had happened. Could this be the secret of the 9th floor of the Sword Pagoda? Longao came to the place where the two experts had fought. He was shocked to find that Jian Tian's aura was still there although he had been obliterated. He did not dare to stay any longer and was about to leave. However, at this moment, Zhen Tian, who had just disappeared, turned into a wisp of divine soul and looked coldly at Longao, who was about to leave. He said in a domineering voice, "Who are you?" Longao shrugged helplessly. He could only turn around bitterly and said, "Senior Zhen Tian, I'm Longao. I entered the 9th floor of the Sword Pagoda and came to this place by accident." Zhen Tian nodded. He was not surprised at all, as if he already knew. He said, "Did you see what happened just now?" Since the matter was already in front of him, it was impossible for him to deny it. Longao nodded and admitted, "I saw the battle between you and the heavenly Tao just now. Forgive me for being blunt, with your strength, you clearly know that you are no match for the heavenly Tao. Why did you fight to the death? You know the heavenly Tao?" "Not really. I know the heavenly Tao, but the heavenly Tao does not know me." "Well, you are a disciple of the Long family." "That's right. Since you are a disciple of the Long family, it is rare for you to be able to cultivate the sword principle and have such a long time. Moreover, now that you have entered this place, you are considered to be fated with me and the sword sect. Well, it seems that it is up to fate whether you can do it or not. Longao, do you understand that as a swordsman, you should be invincible? Even if you know that it is impossible, you still have to move forward bravely. I am just one step away from the heavenly Tao." "One step away?" Of course, Longao knew what the last step that Zhen Tian was talking about was. P.S. Let's start with 4 chapters. I ask for votes from everyone. I hope that everyone will vote for Longao. Chapter 1027. The Origin Source Energy. Longao was almost certain that Long Tian, Zhen Tian, and the primordial divine dragon were all existences that were infinitely close to the peak of the martial Tao. These superpowerhouses were only one step away from the origin source energy. In order to break through the peak of the martial Tao, one had to fuse with the origin source energy. This was also why the heavenly axiom had to guard the origin source energy. No matter who it was, the heavenly axiom would kill anyone who dared to absorb the origin source energy. It was just one step, and no one could do it. As long as the heavenly axiom was not destroyed, no one could absorb the origin source energy and step into the peak of the martial Tao. Longao, I believe you should already know what the last step I'm talking about is. Senior Zhen Tian, since you clearly know, why don't you find an opportunity to absorb the origin source energy and step into the peak of the martial Tao before fighting the heavenly axiom? Longao really couldn't figure it out. Whether it was Long Tian back then or Zhen Tian now, they were a little too confident. The result of their confidence was that they were destroyed by the heavenly axiom. This matter ends here. I believe you already know the secret of the 9th floor of the Sword Pagoda. He nodded. Things had already come to this point. If he still didn't know, he would be a little silly. The secret of the 9th floor of the Sword Pagoda was the murals. His soul would pass through and bring him into the murals to see the so-called Zhen Tian. Longao, I will now impart to you the Supreme Sword Tao. As long as you follow my Sword Tao, you will become a super powerhouse in less than 100 years. At that time, as long as you fuse with the origin source energy, you will be able to step into the peak of the martial Tao. At that time, I only have one request, and that is to help me defeat the heavenly axiom. Inherit Zhen Tian's Sword Tao? Longao had almost guessed Zhen Tian's identity. If there were no surprises, Zhen Tian should be the old ancestor of the sword sect. It was the same reason that Long Tian was the old ancestor of the Long family. Countless people would want to inherit the Sword Tao from such a super powerhouse. However, Longao nodded and then shook his head. You're not willing? Senior Zhen Tian, I can guarantee that as long as I, Longao, can step into the peak of the martial Tao, I will definitely defeat the heavenly axiom. After pausing for a moment, Longao continued, but I can't accept your Sword Tao inheritance. He was rejected. Zhen Tian was dumbfounded. He had never expected the young man in front of him to reject his sword principle inheritance. Longao, do you know what it means to inherit my Sword Tao legacy? Longao was not a fool. How could he not know? Senior Gentian, I believe you know better than me that there is a huge difference between the sword Dao that you have comprehended and the sword Dao that you have inherited. As a sword Dao expert, how could Gentian not know this? However, he really couldn't wait. After all, it wasn't every day that he could meet a fated person. Even if the other party's talent was strong, who knew how long it would take for him to break through to the peak of martial arts? However, Gentian knew very well that there was nothing he could do if Longao did not agree to it, even if he was the patriarch of the sword sect. Senior Gentian, to be honest, if I wanted to, I would have accepted many inheritances. The reason why I rejected all of them was because I wanted to walk on my own martial Dao. I hope you can grant me my wish. Gentian stared at the young man in front of him and sighed deeply in the end. Gentian nodded and said helplessly, in that case, I won't force you. Longao did not feel happy or unwilling. Since he had already made up his mind, he would not hesitate to continue regardless of how difficult it would be. Longao, there is a limit to how much I can help you. Even if you want to walk on your own sword Dao, it's not a bad thing to comprehend my sword Dao. Thank you, Senior. Longao was not a fool. Of course, he would not give up such a rare opportunity. Gentian, as the patriarch of the sword sect and a super existence who was infinitely close to the peak of martial arts, believed that Gentian's sword Dao was very strong. Just as Gentian said, although he insisted on his own sword Dao, it did not mean that he could not comprehend other people's sword Dao. After all, he had already comprehended Sword Demon's sword Dao before. It was very beneficial to his own sword Dao. In the following days, Gentian began to demonstrate his sword Dao and imparted all of his sword Dao comprehension to Longao. It was obvious that Gentian admired Longao very much. Otherwise, he would not have done so. 7 days. Longao followed Gentian to comprehend sword Dao. 7 days was as long as 7 years. Longao's comprehension of sword Dao also improved by leaps and bounds. Longao was pleasantly surprised because he might not be able to comprehend sword Dao in 7 days even if he comprehended it for 7 years. Longao, your talent is the strongest among all the people I have ever seen. After 7 days of contact, I have discovered the sword Dao that you are walking. Gentian seemed to have something to say but he did not finish. Longao was very curious. He did not know what Gentian wanted to say. However, since Gentian did not want to say it, he could not force him to say it. Longao, it is not wrong to insist on your own sword Dao. However, sometimes, integrating sword Dao from all directions is the real way. Do you understand? Longao nodded. How could he not know what Gentian said? Senior Gentian, I've already remembered everything you've said. Gentian seemed to be very satisfied. He smiled and said, Longao, it has been 7 days. It is time for you to leave. When you get out, give my sword to Feng Cheng. Murong Guena, the sword sect master. Longao took the sword and said, no problem. Longao wanted to hide this matter completely. However, Gentian wanted to give the sword to the sword sect master. Wouldn't that be telling the sword sect that he had entered the mural and met the old ancestor of the sword sect, Gentian? He felt helpless. Longao, you can leave now. Longao nodded. He did not want to stay any longer. He did not know why, but he felt that Gentian was not what he appeared to be. Moreover, he did not want to become someone's puppet. He could not do it with Gentian and he could not do it with Gentian now. Looking at the disappearing figure, Gentian's lips curled into a sneer. It was a sneer. It was a sneer. It was a sneer. If Longao was here, he would know what was going on. Longao, Long family, I, Gentian, will not fall. One day, I will step on your corpses and reach the peak of martial arts. Heaven Dao? Ha ha ha, ha ha ha. At this moment, Gentian laughed crazily. The entire space suddenly disappeared. Longao returned to the room. The mural that was there just now had disappeared. Danger. Is this the so-called danger? Longao was depressed. Long Fu and Xiling had said that the 9th floor of the Sword Pagoda was extremely dangerous. However, he did not find out what was so dangerous about it. P.S. The 5th chapter has been delivered. Xiaoju, go and rest. The remaining 5 chapters will be updated tomorrow. I hope everyone can vote. Chapter 1028. On the 9th floor of the Sword Pagoda. Longao stood quietly in the room, looking around. Hiss, hiss, hiss. At this moment, a strange sound was heard in the room. It sounded particularly harsh. Longao was startled. He felt a pair of eyes staring at him from behind, but he couldn't see anything when he turned around. Longao, get out of here quickly. Longao's heart skipped a beat when he heard Xiling's anxious voice. Xiling's strength and arrogance were obvious. Even Xiling was afraid of him. It was obvious what had happened. Longao wanted to find out what other secrets there were on the 9th floor of the Sword Pagoda other than the murals. However, he didn't want to be one of the dead souls on the 9th floor of the Sword Pagoda. He turned around and prepared to leave the 9th floor of the Sword Pagoda. Boom! There was a loud noise. Before Longao could leave, there was a rumbling sound. The sound of thunder and lightning was heard. A terrifying thunder and lightning sword chi directly struck down and struck towards Longao. They looked at each other coldly. Longao didn't dodge at all. He also wanted to see how far his sword principle had reached. He struck out with his god-killing sword. Sword chi of 100 feet shot out and collided with the sword chi of thunder and lightning. The sword chi collided with a thunderous sound. Puff! Longao was still injured by the sword chi of thunder and lightning. He spat out a mouthful of blood and flew backward like a kite with a broken string. He fell heavily to the ground. Longao didn't dare to be careless. He turned over and jumped up from the ground. The sword chi of thunder and lightning continued to attack wildly. Longao used teleportation to dodge the sword chi of thunder and lightning. However, the whole room was gradually filled with sword chi of thunder and lightning. Even teleportation was useless. At this moment, Longao finally knew what danger Long Fu and Xiling were talking about. The secret of the 9th floor of the Sword Pagoda was in the murals. Longao knew very well that not everyone could enter the murals on the 9th floor of the Sword Pagoda. The lightning sword chi was extremely terrifying. Longao was helpless because it was impossible for him to leave the 9th floor of the pagoda even if he wanted to. Put yourself in a desperate situation and fight to survive. Hearing Xiling's words, Longao was very curious. He didn't know what Xiling meant. Could it be that he was going to be struck to death by the Thunder Sword Chi? Was this the only way to survive? Xiling, what do you mean? Longao, if you want to leave this place safely, then use yourself as the sword energy and forcefully collide with the lightning sword energy. My grass. Cursing in his heart, Longao realized that his guess was right. Xiling's intention was very simple. He wanted Longao to collide with the lightning sword chi. The probability of him being struck to death was too high. If it was an ordinary person, they would definitely not do such a thing. After all, who in the world would throw away their lives for nothing? Longao was different. If it were in the past, he wouldn't have chosen to believe Xiling. However, at this moment, there was no need for Xiling to deceive him. With his body as the sword chi, Longao let out a loud roar and shot toward the lightning sword chi. Longao transformed into a 300-meter-long sword energy and collided with the lightning sword energy. The rumbling sound of thunder was constantly heard and resounded throughout the entire 9th floor of the Sword Pagoda. If someone were here, they would definitely curse Longao for being stupid. He was simply courting death. The moment Longao's transformed sword energy collided with the lightning sword energy, he disappeared. Longao didn't know where he was. It was pitch black all around and he couldn't move. However, at this moment, Longao was pleasantly surprised. He immediately entered the state of sword principle and began to multiply his sword energy, Thunderbolt 36 styles, and Emperor Dragon's 9 kills. Outside the Sword Pagoda. Time passed quickly. In the blink of an eye, a month had passed. Lu Changsheng's face was extremely gloomy because he had already guessed that Longao must have received help from the master for being able to stay in the Sword Pagoda for such a long time. Otherwise, with Longao's strength, how could it be possible? Black Wolf, no matter what your relationship with the master is, I will kill you. It had been a month since Black Wolf entered the Sword Pagoda. The news had spread throughout the Sword Sect. Anyone who received the news was shocked. With Black Wolf's strength, he wasn't qualified to enter the Sword Pagoda. Now that he had forced his way in, according to all the calculations, Black Wolf wouldn't even last 2 hours in the Sword Pagoda. But what was the result? An entire month. What did that mean? The rules of the Sword Pagoda were there. For countless years, no one had been able to break this rule except for Longao. It was precisely because of this. Everyone began to look forward to Longao's appearance. They began to gather around the Sword Pagoda. Many people wanted to know if Black Wolf would be able to come out or be obliterated by the Sword Pagoda. More and more people gathered around the Sword Pagoda. Opposite the Sword Pagoda, on the peak of the mountain, Yi Xian didn't succeed in his enlightenment this time. He was somewhat dissatisfied. After all, every epiphany was something that could only be encountered by chance. If he didn't make a breakthrough this time, who knew when the next epiphany would be? Elder Yi Xian, there's no need to be disappointed. This epiphany will be of great help to your cultivation. According to my senses, if there are no accidents, you will be able to break through the final bottleneck in at most 100 years. Upon hearing the master's words, Yi Xian was delighted. Although 100 years was a little too long for a warrior, Yi Xian knew very well that if he could really break through the final bottleneck and become a master within 100 years, it would be very worthwhile. After taking a deep breath, Yi Xian didn't continue to dwell on this issue. Just as the master had said, although he didn't make a breakthrough this time, it would be of great help to his cultivation. Master, Longao has been in the Sword Pagoda for an entire month. I don't know what's the situation. Why don't I go in and take a look? At this point, even Yi Xian and Murong Guenar were somewhat expectant. They didn't know if Longao had obtained an opportunity. Murong Guenar waved his hand and said, I've already said that opportunities can only be encountered by chance. For so many years, no one has obtained an opportunity other than the old ancestor sword demon. Even you and I back then. Longao entered the 9th level of the Sword Pagoda and didn't come out for an entire month. I can almost say that Longao didn't obtain an opportunity from the old ancestor. Yi Xian nodded and agreed with the master's words. He said, if that's the case, Longao will be attacked by the lightning sword aura. It's really unknown whether he can come out or not. In fact, what Yi Xian wanted to say was that Longao was probably doomed on the 9th level of the Sword Pagoda. However, he didn't say it in the end. Murong Guenar didn't say anything. No one knew what he was thinking. However, Murong Guenar and Yi Xian didn't leave the mountain peak. Instead, they looked at the Sword Pagoda opposite them. P.S. Here's the 6th chapter. Everyone votes. Chapter 1029. In the 9th floor of the Sword Pagoda. Longao was trapped in a pitch-black space with his body as a sword. He couldn't see his surroundings clearly. He didn't know what was happening. Longao didn't give up on this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. He realized that his speed of comprehending the sword Dao had increased by 100 times. What kind of concept was this? Break. With a loud roar, Longao's realm power in his body skyrocketed. He broke through from the blue-grade Great Emperor realm to the purple-grade Great Emperor realm. Although it was only the early purple-grade Great Emperor realm, Longao was still extremely surprised. Longao really couldn't imagine that in just a few minutes, his cultivation had once again broken through. A breakthrough of 1 level, was this for real? According to Longao's guess, he would need a huge amount of energy to break through from the blue-grade Great Emperor realm to the purple-grade Great Emperor realm. Even so, it wouldn't be easy to break through. The 1st floor of the Sword Pagoda. The 3 Xiong brothers and Feng Hua waited for a month. They were getting impatient. Big brother, do you think Black Wolf is already dead? Not only second brother Xiong, but third brother Xiong and Feng Hua also had the same thought. Eldest brother Xiong didn't know if Black Wolf was dead or alive. No matter what, the four of them hoped that Black Wolf had died in the Sword Pagoda. This would save them a lot of trouble. Look, are my eyes playing tricks on me? Seeing Black Wolf walking towards them, the four of them were dumbfounded. They were almost certain that Longao would die if he went to the 7th floor of the Sword Pagoda. But now, Black Wolf was standing in front of them. If they didn't see it with their own eyes, they wouldn't believe it even if they were beaten to death. Black Wolf, you're really lucky. Longao waved his hand and didn't give the four of them any chance to talk nonsense. He said coldly, "Four limbs mad dog." The four of them were instantly enraged by Black Wolf's insult. Black Wolf, don't be arrogant. I'm officially challenging you now. Do you dare to accept? The four of them had already made up their minds. Even if Black Wolf didn't dare to accept the challenge, they would think of a way to deal with Black Wolf. After all, after killing Black Wolf, no one would know. Who would know that they were the ones who killed Black Wolf? Taking a step back. Even if it was known that they had killed Black Wolf by accident, other than the fact that they had the support of the law enforcement elder, the sect would not be able to do anything to them. But in the end, I accept the challenge. Fire Beacon was a little surprised, but when he heard that the other party actually dared to accept the challenge, he was pleasantly surprised. This way, he could openly kill the other party. The three Xiong brothers gave Fire Beacon a meaningful glance. Their meaning was clear. Then, the three Xiong brothers took 3 steps back. In a short while, the surroundings were filled with people. These were the disciples of the sword sect who had entered the Sword Pagoda to cultivate. Many people already knew about Black Wolf. Because of this, everyone was speculating about Black Wolf's identity. Also, Black Wolf was only a Cyan Great Sovereign. How could he enter the Sword Pagoda and stay there for a whole month? Fire Beacon and Longao stood face to face. So calm. Looking at the other party's indifferent expression, Fire Beacon didn't know why, but he suddenly had a bad premonition. The more Black Wolf acted like this, the more uncertain Fire Beacon was. Could it be that Black Wolf had a trump card? Black Wolf's situation was obviously different from the others. To be able to cultivate in the Sword Pagoda as a Cyan Great Sovereign and stay there for a whole month, who in the entire sword sect could do that? Black Wolf. One move. What move? Hearing Black Wolf say one move, everyone was curious, including the 3 Xiong brothers. They all looked at Black Wolf, thinking that Black Wolf was scared silly and said one move out of the blue. Could it be that Black Wolf wants to defeat Fire Beacon in one move? Someone in the crowd said something. Everyone was shocked when they heard this. With regards to Hei Lang's strength, everyone was well aware of it. Cyan Great Sovereign. Everyone knew that the difference between a Cyan Great Sovereign and a Black Great Sovereign was too big. Not to mention one move, even 10,000 moves wouldn't be enough. If a Black Great Sovereign were to say that he could defeat a Cyan Great Sovereign in one move, it would be more reasonable. Everyone thought that Longao was retarded. How could he be so arrogant? He was simply courting death. Ha ha ha, ha ha ha. Hearing Black Wolf's words, Fire Beacon laughed crazily. His laughter was filled with disdain and contempt, as if he had heard the funniest joke in the world. Black Wolf, if you could defeat me in one move, I would have killed myself here. A gentleman keeps his word. A man keeps his word. Longao looked at his opponent coldly. He didn't plan to use the god-slaying sword. If it was before he entered the Sword Pagoda, he wouldn't have done this. No matter how confident he was in his own strength, he couldn't defeat his opponent in one move. After all, the difference between a Black Great Sovereign and a Cyan Great Sovereign was obvious. But now, the situation was completely reversed. After cultivating on the 8th and 9th level of the Sword Pagoda, he had entered the Purple Great Sovereign realm from the Cyan Great Sovereign realm. Even if his opponent was a Black Great Sovereign, Longao was still confident that he could defeat his opponent in one move. This was absolute confidence. Using his finger as a sword. Seeing Black Wolf's intention, Fire Beacon obviously wouldn't use his weapon. Similarly, he used his finger as a sword. Both of them were ready to strike, but neither of them made the first move. The entire first level of the sword pagoda was exceptionally quiet. Everyone stared at the two of them, wanting to see if Fire Beacon was stronger or if Black Wolf was just boasting. According to Black Wolf's special situation, some people were actually anticipating that Black Wolf could defeat Fire Beacon in one move. But many of them knew that this was almost impossible. Time passed by slowly. Both of them still didn't make a move. What was going on? Everyone realized that something was wrong. Under normal circumstances, Fire Beacon should have already made his move. But now, at this moment, beads of sweat appeared on Fire Beacon's forehead, dripping down. He looked extremely solemn. What's going on? The three Seong brothers were dumbfounded. They looked at each other, wanting to know what was going on with Fire Beacon. Sword aura. Others might not be able to sense it, but Fire Beacon was extremely depressed. This was because he never expected Black Wolf's sword aura to be so powerful. Putting aside who was stronger and who was weaker, he had already lost in terms of sword aura. Take my sword. Longao's sword aura had successfully suppressed Fire Beacon. He was overjoyed. Seizing this rare opportunity, he used his finger as a sword without hesitation and fiercely shot out a sword. Terrifying sword chi was released along with a powerful internal sword aura, suppressing Fire Beacon. This sword aura looked ordinary, but it was actually weak on the outside and strong on the inside. Chapter 1030. Everyone let out a sigh of relief. Black Wolf's attack was too ordinary. Not to mention Feng Hua, even an ordinary Great Emperor Realm expert would be able to block it easily. Even so, he still wanted to defeat Feng Hua in one move. Was Black Wolf too arrogant and overconfident, or was he retarded? The three Seong brothers also let out a long sigh of relief. However, at this moment, before Feng Hua could react, the sword chi had already arrived. The sword chi shot out by Longao was too fast. It was like a meteor. If it was an ordinary sword, Feng Hua wouldn't care. However, Longao first used the sword aura to suppress Feng Hua, then used the sword chi to slash down at an unbelievable speed. Longao wasn't an idiot. He knew clearly that if it was just strength, he wouldn't be able to defeat Feng Hua in 10 moves, let alone one. After all, Feng Hua's strength was above the purple-grade Great Emperor realm. That was exactly the case. Longao used the sword aura to suppress Feng Hua. In this way, it wasn't impossible to defeat Feng Hua in one move. Crack. One had to admit that Feng Hua's speed was very fast. Seeing that he was being suppressed by the sword aura, it wasn't a question of whether he could defeat Feng Hua, but whether he could be killed. Of course, Feng Hua didn't want to die. No one would want to die for nothing. While dodging, Feng Hua's right arm was cut off by the sword chi. Feng Hua screamed in agony, his body was on the verge of collapsing. Longao was a little disappointed that the sword chi didn't kill Feng Hua. However, Longao was already very satisfied with his strength. Cutting off Feng Hua's right arm in one move? What kind of concept was that? At this moment, everyone had successfully sensed that Black Wolf wasn't a green-grade Great Emperor Realm expert, but a genuine purple-grade Great Emperor Realm expert. Breaking through 2 levels in a month. Everyone sighed when they saw the young man with blood-red hair. His cultivation speed was simply too terrifying. However, no one said that Black Wolf's natural talent was great. Instead, they attributed all the credit to the Sword Pagoda. The Sword Pagoda was the supreme cultivation holy land of the Sword Sect. In everyone's opinion, anything was possible in the Sword Pagoda. Black Wolf. Without giving Feng Hua any chance to speak, Longao sneered, "You're just a loser. Next time, you won't be so lucky." Longao continued to linger. He took a step forward and left the Sword Pagoda. The 3 Seong brothers looked at each other and saw the shock in each other's eyes. The 3 of them had never imagined that Black Wolf would be able to cut off Fire Beacon's arm in one move. Not daring to have the slightest hesitation, the 3 Seong brothers and the others filed out, and followed closely behind Longao. Outside the sword pagoda, everyone sighed when they saw Black Wolf coming out. Lu Changsheng's face was extremely gloomy, but he didn't show himself. No matter what happened, he couldn't let the sect know that he dealt with Black Wolf. Otherwise, even if he was the sect's law enforcement elder, he would be in big trouble. He cursed the three Xiong brothers in his heart. A bunch of trash. The three of them couldn't even kill Black Wolf. Black Wolf, we, the three Xiong brothers, challenge you. Do you dare to accept? Fire Beacon also came out, but he didn't stay any longer. Losing to Black Wolf in one move was a great humiliation. He didn't have the face to stay any longer and could only leave with his tail between his legs. Under such circumstances, no one cared about Fire Beacon. The three of them challenging Black Wolf alone was a shameless thing in itself. But since things had come to this point, the three Xiong brothers were ready to throw caution to the wind. So what if they were shameless? At least it was better than not being able to answer to the elders when they returned. The three of them were very clear that if they couldn't kill Black Wolf, they wouldn't be in a good situation when they returned. Compared to their lives and future, their reputation wasn't worth mentioning. Although the onlookers despised the three Xiong brothers, they had already issued a challenge. It wouldn't be right if Black Wolf didn't accept the challenge. However, Black Wolf was a consecrated. His reputation was the most important thing. Would the consecrated Black Wolf accept the challenge? Everyone already had the answer in their hearts. The consecrated Black Wolf definitely wouldn't accept the challenge because no one would throw away their lives for nothing. Unless there was something wrong with one's brain, there was no reason to force it. Among the three Xiong brothers, the eldest was a gold-grade Great Emperor, the second was a white-grade Great Emperor, and the third was a black-grade Great Emperor. Under the joint attack of the three Xiong brothers, not to mention a purple-grade Great Emperor, even a white-grade Great Emperor would be instantly killed. Even a gold-grade Great Emperor wouldn't dare to accept the challenge easily. Because of this, everyone was certain that Black Wolf wouldn't accept the challenge. There was 100% chance that he wouldn't accept the challenge. I accept the challenge. I accept the challenge. I accept the challenge. I accept the challenge. Suddenly, Black Wolf's voice resounded outside the sword pagoda. Everyone was dumbfounded. Did Black Wolf really accept the challenge? Even if Black Wolf had broken through from green-grade Great Emperor to purple-grade Great Emperor in the sword pagoda, there was still a huge gap between him and the three Xiong brothers. Black Wolf might not be able to win in a one-on-one battle, let alone one against three. The news of Longao cutting off Feng Hua's arm in one strike had already spread. Even so, no one was optimistic about Black Wolf. Even if Black Wolf could cut off Feng Hua's arm in one strike, it didn't mean that he was a match for a white-grade Great Emperor or a gold-grade Great Emperor. Putting aside Black Wolf's strength and whether he could withstand the three Xiong brothers, Black Wolf's courage alone was worthy of respect. Some people had already stopped being envious and started to look forward to Black Wolf. Such courage was hard to come by. Hearing that Black Wolf had accepted the challenge, the three Xiong brothers were overjoyed. They couldn't wait to attack immediately. However, the three Xiong brothers held themselves back in the end. They had already been shameless. If they continued to be shameless, how could they survive in the sect in the future? Black Wolf, are you preparing for a group battle or a one-on-one battle? Longao didn't speak. The others were also curious. They didn't know what Boss Xiong meant by group battle or one-on-one battle. Wasn't it supposed to be the three of them fighting against Black Wolf together? Black Wolf, I'll give you a chance. Group battle, you will fight against the three of us. One-on-one battle, the three of us will fight against you. Choose for yourself. F***ck hearing Boss Xiong's shamelessness, everyone started cursing in their hearts. They had seen shameless people before, but they had never seen someone as shameless as Boss Xiong. This mother*** was simply shameless to the extreme. He was the only one in this world. Longao wasn't angry at all. He smiled and said, from the beginning to the end, I've never seen the three of you as humans. In my eyes, you're at most three mad dogs. Mad dogs, it's understandable that you're shameless. P.S. The 8th chapter has been delivered. The remaining 2 chapters will be delivered later. Everyone can vote. Chapter 1031. Mad Dog. Shameless. Upon hearing Black Wolf's words, laughter could be heard from all around. Black Wolf, you. Without waiting for the 3 Seong brothers to speak, Longao said impatiently, if you want to fight, then fight. If you don't, then scram. One had to admit that Longao was really arrogant. Ha ha ha, Black Wolf, as the sect's consecrator, we should give you a handicap. Please. It was a blatant disdain. In the eyes of the 3 Seong brothers, this consecrator in front of them was nothing. Under normal circumstances, ordinary disciples had no right to challenge a consecrator. After all, the consecrators of the sword sect were all extremely powerful. The weakest one was a titled great emperor or even a supreme Dao martial artist. However, Longao's situation was a little special. It was natural for the 3 Seong brothers to challenge a consecrator. They took the initiative to attack. Longao took a step forward and charged forward. Before he arrived, his terrifying sword aura had already suppressed the 3 Seong brothers. When Longao fought with Feng Hua, he didn't reveal his sword aura. Therefore, until now, the 3 Seong brothers didn't know how terrifying Black Wolf's sword aura was. Now that they had learned their lesson, the 3 Seong brothers didn't dare to be careless. The 3 of them attacked from different directions. Even though it was 1 against 3, Longao didn't show any fear. Instead, he seemed to be getting braver as the battle went on. 36 thunder styles in addition to the Emperor Dragon's 9 fatal strikes. There was no dragon roar, only the sound of thunder. Longao used his fingers as a sword. Each strike was faster than the previous one. In the end, Longao's figure couldn't be seen at all. The sword aura layered on top of each other, and its power was amplified. Black Wolf, don't you dare. Seeing Black Wolf charging at their 3rd brother, both the eldest Seong brother and the 2nd Seong brother panicked. However, it had to be known that 3rd brother and Fire Beacon's strength were about the same. Since Black Wolf was able to cut off Fire Beacon's arm in one move, his strength was obvious. 3rd brother's strength alone was definitely not enough to stop Black Wolf. Longao didn't stop at all. Even if he didn't make use of teleportation, his speed was still extremely fast. It wasn't something that the 2 of them could compete with. The corners of his mouth curled up into a sneer. Longao chose to ignore the 2 of them and continued shooting towards Seong Larosan. Longao was very clear that if he wanted to win, he had to end the battle quickly. Otherwise, with the combined strength of the 3 Seong brothers, it would be very difficult for him to win. End the battle quickly. Longao instantly arrived in front of Seong Larosan. Using his fingers as a sword, he ruthlessly struck out with the 36 thunderbolt styles. Longao's strength and understanding of sword Dao were no longer the same as before. Even if it was a black-grade great emperor, Longao could almost instantly kill him. Catcher! Under Seong Laosan's shocked gaze, the sword chi slashed across. If it wasn't for Longao holding back, Seong Laosan would have been dead by this move alone. This was Longao's strength. Seeing Seong Laosan's arm being cut off, the surrounding spectators were all dumbfounded. Was a purple-grade great emperor so powerful? In a secluded place far away. Seeing Hei Lang fighting 1 against 3, not only was he at ease, he was even able to chop off Seong Laosan's arm. Lu Changsheng's expression turned ugly as he clenched his fists tightly. If not for the fact that he was worried about the sect and the sect master, he would have already made his move. Endure. In the end, Lu Changsheng still endured. After all, there would be plenty of opportunities in the future. Longao successfully cut off Seong Laosan's arm and ruthlessly kicked Seong Laosan's dantian. This time, Seong Laosan completely lost the ability to fight back. Seeing Seong Laosan's arm being cut off, Seong Laosan and Seong Laosan were both shocked. Before the 2 of them could get close, Longao's backhand slashed out. The sword chi swept out and forced the 2 of them to stay outside. Before the 2 of them could react, Longao had already charged over. This time, Longao directly used his sword force to suppress the 2 of them. Even Xiong Laosan couldn't resist the sword force's suppression. Feeling the terrifying sword force suppression, the two of them were very surprised. The two of them couldn't figure out why their opponent, who was only a purple-grade Great Emperor, could condense such a terrifying sword force. Even with their strength, they couldn't resist it. Sword force suppressing sword force. The sword force released by the two of them was instantly engulfed by Longao's sword force. However, Longao didn't continue to attack. Longao was very confident in his strength and sword force, but he also knew his own limits. With his current strength, he still couldn't defeat a gold-grade Great Emperor. As for a white-grade Great Emperor, it was still unknown whether he could defeat one. That was exactly the case. Longao knew when to stop. As long as the Xiong brothers didn't continue to attack, he would have already won this battle. As expected. Just as Longao had guessed, the sword force he released just now had already frightened the two of them. Xiong Laosan and Xiong Laosan stared at Black Wolf in front of them. In the end, the two of them still chose to give up. Lost. The two of them chose to give up. The surrounding spectators were very clear that the three Xiong brothers had lost this battle. Black Wolf Consecrator had won. HMPH, Black Wolf, just you wait. Seeing that the three Xiong brothers had lost, Lu Changsheng didn't stay any longer. He turned around and left. In a short while, Lu Changsheng had already disappeared without a trace. Seeing that you're disciples of the sword sect, I'll let you off today. Remember, don't provoke me again. At this point, Longao didn't continue, but the meaning in his words was very clear. The three Xiong brothers weren't fools. Of course, they understood the meaning in his words. However, since things had already come to this point, they had nothing else to say. The three Xiong brothers turned around and left. The surrounding spectators sighed. Until now, many people still couldn't believe this battle. A purple-grade Great Emperor had actually defeated the three Xiong brothers. If they hadn't seen it with their own eyes, they wouldn't have believed it even if they were beaten to death. After defeating the three Xiong brothers, Longao didn't stay any longer. He also turned around and left. Outside the sword pagoda, the spectators gradually dispersed. Some of them returned to the sword pagoda to continue cultivating. The battle between the two sides had finally come to an end. Opposite the sword pagoda, on the peak of the mountain, Murong Guenar and Yi Xian had watched the battle between the three Xiong brothers and Longao from beginning to end. After the battle ended, Yi Xian said with a smile, "What a cunning Longao." He knew that he wasn't a match for the two of them, so he deliberately set up a trap. If Longao used his full strength, he could kill a white-grade Great Emperor. Sword aura, such a powerful sword aura. If I'm not mistaken, Longao must have obtained the old ancestor's secret. Ah! Hearing the master's words, Yi Xian was shocked. He knew very well what it meant to obtain the old ancestor's secret. After so many years, other than the old ancestor sword demon, wasn't Longao the second person to obtain the old ancestor's secret? Master, what should we do now? Chapter 1032. Leave this to me. Yes, Master. Murong Guenar looked at the disappearing figure with an indescribable expression. In the sword sect. In the main hall. There were only two people in the main hall. One was the sword sect master, known as the Emperor Ken, Murong Guenar. The other was Longao, who had just left the sword pagoda and defeated the fire beacon and the three Xiong brothers. He was also the enshrined Black Wolf of the sword sect. Longao, did you gain anything from the sword pagoda this time? Longao was a little amused. Longao had already guessed Murong Guenar's intention for suddenly looking for him. He wanted to ask if he had obtained the secret of the sword pagoda. Longao did not hide anything from him. He told him everything about entering the murals on the 9th floor of the sword pagoda and meeting Jian Tian. After listening to him, Murong Guenar was very surprised because he never expected that Longao would not accept the ancestor's inheritance. He knew very well what the ancestor's sword principal inheritance meant. Longao, why don't you accept the ancestor's sword principal inheritance? Do you know that once you accept it, You will become one of the most powerful warriors in the world in the future. Longao knew what Murong Guenar meant. He thought about it. Master, I just want to walk my own sword principle. What belongs to others will always belong to others. Seeing that Longao did not want to say more, Murong Guenar sighed deeply. In fact, he was still looking forward to this outcome. After all, Longao was still an outsider. If he received the ancestors' sword principle inheritance, what would the sword sect do if he betrayed the sword sect in the future? Master, this is what the ancestor gave you. Longao did not take it for himself. He took out the sword that Jian Tian had given him. After receiving the sword, Murong Guenar's entire body began to tremble. Without saying a word, he stared at the sword in his hand. Longao, what orders does the old ancestor have? No. You can go first. Nodding his head, Longao turned around and left. Only Murong Guenar was left in the hall. At this moment, the sword emitted a terrifying sword Dao. Then, Jian Tian's divine soul appeared. Seeing the divine soul of the old ancestor, Murong Guenar immediately knelt on the ground and shouted with great respect, "Disciple Murong Guenar greets the old ancestor. Induction, you are still one step away." Exactly. Murong Guenar did not know why the old ancestor asked that. Could it be that the old ancestor wanted to help him? After leaving the hall, Longao said with a smile, "Yang come out." Just as expected. Yang walked out slowly and said with a smile, "Longao, I really have to congratulate you. You have advanced to the purple grade Great Emperor realm after entering the Sword Pagoda." Even Murong Yang was a little surprised when she heard about Longao. In just a month, he had advanced from the green grade Great Emperor realm to the purple grade Great Emperor realm. If she did not witness it with her own eyes, it would be hard to believe such a cultivation speed. Yang, you are making fun of me. How could Longao not know about Yang good intentions? As for Yang strength, Longao was indeed a little surprised. This was because he did not expect Murong Yang's strength to be above a titled Great Emperor. In other words, she was a supreme Dao martial artist. However, after thinking about it, he understood. One should know that Murong Yang was the daughter of the sword sect master. The good things would definitely be given to Yang first. With Yang talent, how could she not have such achievements? Mph, I don't dare to make fun of you. Longao, you have defeated the three Xiong brothers this time. I believe Lu Changsheng will not let this go easily. You should be more careful in the future. Nodding his head. Longao had already guessed that the three Xiong brothers were sent by Lu Changsheng to kill him. He believed that Lu Changsheng would not let him go after this failure. There would be endless trouble in the future. Yang, are you looking for me for something? Yes, I heard from my father that you will be participating in the Sword Sect's assassination mission. Longao, I believe that Lu Changsheng will definitely deal with you in this mission. If possible, you should not participate. How could Longao not know about Yang worries? Not to mention Lu Changsheng, he believed that no matter who it was, they would not easily choose to give up this opportunity. Assassination mission. Previously, Murong Guenar had already mentioned it to him. Longao also wanted to experience the Sword Sect's assassination mission. Moreover, without experience and danger, how could one's strength increase? Longao was very clear about the purple grade Great Emperor realm. With his current strength, it was still far from enough. He was still very far away from the Supreme Dao realm. Therefore, no matter what happened in this assassination mission, he would choose to participate. Are you going to participate? Yang understood Longao very well. She could roughly guess his intentions just by looking at his expression. She sighed deeply in her heart and said helplessly, I knew that you would definitely participate in the assassination mission. Longao, listen to my advice. Lu Changsheng is the sect's enforcement elder after all. With your current situation, you will be at a disadvantage if you fight with him. The enforcement elder controlled the sword sect's abundant resources. If Lu Changsheng wanted to play some tricks in the assassination mission, it would be a piece of cake. Yang, there are some things that I must do. I will also participate in the assassination mission. Counter soldiers with arms, Water with an earth weir. No matter what tricks Lu Changsheng plays, I will take them all on. Seeing Longao's determined face, Yang Er sighed deeply again and said helplessly, I will also participate in the assassination mission this time. When the time comes, you and I will travel together. I don't believe that Lu Changsheng will dare to play any tricks. Murong Yang Er was obviously participating in the assassination mission for his sake. Longao was not a fool. Of course, he could guess it. He asked curiously, Yang Er, does the sect allow Supreme Dao warriors to participate in the assassination mission? Longao more or less knew about the Sword Sect's assassination mission. Only titled Great Emperors and below were allowed to participate. Swordsmen above the Supreme Dao realm were prohibited from entering. If Yang Er insisted on participating, he believed that no one could stop her. However, if something happened to Yang Er, he would not be able to explain it. No, but I have a way. Yang Er, do you trust me? Yang Er didn't know why Longao asked this, but she still nodded. Her meaning was very clear. Yang Er, since you have chosen to trust me, then let me deal with the assassination mission alone. No matter what happens, don't interfere, okay? But, is that okay? Seeing that Longao had already made his decision, Yang Er knew very well that it was useless for her to say anything more. She shrugged helplessly and could only say bitterly, in that case, I can only wish you good luck. However, you must be careful in everything you do. P.S. All 10 chapters have been delivered. Chapter 1033. After sending off Yang Er, Longao immediately started cultivating. Longao had never thought that he would be able to break through from the green-grade Great Emperor realm to the purple-grade Great Emperor realm after entering the Sword Pagoda. Who knew how long it would take to break through 2 whole levels if he were to cultivate under normal circumstances? The Sword Pagoda was indeed the cultivation sacred ground of the Sword Sect. Longao knew clearly that if he could cultivate in the Sword Pagoda for another 8 to 10 years, it wouldn't be difficult for him to break through to the Supreme Dao realm. Longao, your cultivation is too low. Looking at Xiling who suddenly appeared in front of him, Longao was very curious. He didn't know what Xiling meant. Xiling, get straight to the point. Xiling nodded and walked to the side to sit down. Longao, let's be frank. You and I can help each other. What do you think? How can we help each other? Longao was even more curious. He didn't know what Xiling meant. You help me and my sister to return to our peak condition, and I'll help you to increase your strength quickly. 2 birds with 1 stone. What do you think? I see. Regarding what Purple Spirit said, Longao already understood it clearly. Since things had already progressed to this stage, Longao certainly wouldn't choose to object. Of course, he knew what Xiling meant. No problem. Xiling let out a rare smile and said, Longao, from now on, other than continuing to cultivate your sword principle, I'll help you to strengthen and condense your sword principle. This way, your cultivation speed will increase by at least 10 times. F***ck Longao cursed in his heart. Although he had already guessed it, he still couldn't help but be shocked when Xiling actually said it out loud. Xiling, how do you need me to help you? All along. Longao didn't believe that a free lunch would fall from the sky. It was already good enough that Xiling didn't kill him. How could he help him for no reason? Regardless of whether others believed it or not, he didn't believe it. We'll talk about that later. He shrugged helplessly. Hey! At this moment, Longao realized that Long Fu was summoning him. He informed Xiling and entered the Dragon Seal space. Ever since he was able to enter the Dragon Seal space with his body, Longao wouldn't enter the Dragon Seal space with his soul unless he had no other choice. The risk was too great. In the Dragon Seal space. Long Fu, what is it? Longao knew very well that Long Fu would not summon him unless there was something important. Could it be about the Sword Demon's soul slave? Just as expected. Just as Longao guessed, Long Fu nodded and said, Master, I've already refined the Sword Demon's remnant soul into a soul slave. According to the power of the Sword Demon's soul slave, Master can even leave with the help of the soul slave. As for its power, It's enough to kill a titled great emperor. Hearing Long Fu's words, Longao was overjoyed. This mother***, he could get whatever he wanted. However, he was about to participate in the Sword Sect's sword assassination mission. With Lu Changsheng as a threat, it could be said that he was surrounded by danger. If he wasn't careful, he would get into trouble and be consigned to eternal damnation. However, now that he had the Sword Demon's soul slave, Longao could finally breathe a sigh of relief. Long Fu had already said that with the power of the Sword Demon's soul slave, it was enough to kill a titled great emperor. As for the Supreme Dao or Peerless Supreme Dao, they could use the power of the soul slave to leave smoothly. Although it couldn't block the attack of a Nirvana realm martial artist, Longao was already satisfied. The sword assassination mission, martial artists below the Supreme Dao could participate. In other words, if he participated in the sword assassination mission, he could do whatever he wanted and ignore everyone's existence. Long Fu, this time I've successfully refined the Sword Demon's remnant soul. Next, I hope you can help me refine the Great Emperor's soul slave army. What do you think? Longao had already thought it through. Even with the help of the Sword Demon's soul slave, he was still very passive most of the time. If he could refine hundreds of thousands or even millions of soul slaves, and all of them were Great Emperor-level soul slaves, at that time, as long as he gave the order, who would dare to ignore him? In this world, especially in the Sky Martial continent, strength was respected. Without a fist, you were a grandson and no one would put you in their eyes. That was exactly the case. Longao was prepared to refine a million corpse slave army. At that time, no matter who it was, if they dared to make a fuss, he would just go to war. Anyway, he had the help of the Sword Demon's soul slave. As long as he didn't meet a Nirvana realm martial artist, he believed that everything would be fine. Long Fu thought for a while and nodded. How could Long Fu not know what his master was thinking? Master, refining a million corpse slave army is not a problem. But master, have you thought about where we can find a million soul slaves? Longao was helpless and even a little depressed. It was as Long Fu had said. Refining soul slaves was not a problem at all. Even refining an army of a million corpses would not be a problem. After all, Long Fu was borrowing the power of the blood pool. This was a simple matter. As long as he had enough time, he could accomplish it. But a million soul slaves. In order to refine a million corpse slave army, he had to find a million soul slaves first. This matter sounded simple, but it was incomparably difficult. Even if he went to the Spirit Beast Forest and wanted to kill a million Great Emperor Spirit Beasts, it was still an extremely difficult matter. Could it be that he had to give up just like that? Long Fu, I will deal with the soul slaves. When the time comes, I will have to trouble you. Don't worry, when the time comes, I will do my best to help Master refine a soul slave army. A soul slave army. This time, Longao did not want to refine a corpse slave army. Compared to a soul slave's strength was far above a corpse slave's. However, a soul slave could not leave the dragon seal space, which made it inferior to a corpse slave army. But after thinking about it, Longao was still prepared to refine a soul slave army. Longao, who had just left the dragon seal space, was preparing to continue cultivating in order to deal with the upcoming sword massacre operation. But at this moment, the situation suddenly changed. Longao's expression changed abruptly. Without hesitation, he immediately got up and left his residence, shooting towards the back mountain of the sword sect. Flying in the air, Longao borrowed the speed of spatial teleportation and left the sword sect mountain in a short while. After reaching a mountain peak far away from the sword sect mountain, he barely stopped. Longao did not care about anything else, because he never thought that the two primal chaos stone tablets would choose to make a move at this time. He had no control over the primal chaos stone tablets. According to Long Fu, in this world, there was no one who could possess two primal chaos stone tablets at the same time. He was the first, and could be said to be the first. The two primal chaos stone tablets could collide at any time. At that time, the fish in the moat would be affected. Chapter 1034. Long Fu, what should I do? Longao did not understand the 2 primal chaos stone tablets at all. The 5 elements primal chaos stone tablet. 2 of the 12 primal chaos stone tablets in the world. Longao was afraid that something like this would happen. If he was unlucky, he would be caught in the crossfire and killed by the collision of the 2 primal chaos stone tablets. Master, hurry and circulate the 5 elements devouring heaven art and the firmament devouring art. Try to separate the 2 primal chaos stone tablets. He nodded. The situation was urgent. No matter what method he used, as long as he could separate the 2 primal chaos stone tablets, everything would be fine. Longao did not hesitate. He immediately circulated the 2 primal chaos stone tablets. They were the 5 elements devouring heaven art and the firmament devouring art. The 2 different powers revolved with the Tao of yin and yang. Xiling and Bai Ling appeared. Looking at Longao, who was sweating profusely as if he was in a big battle, Bai Ling's face was filled with worry. Sister, hurry and help young Master Long help. She sighed helplessly. Xiling did not expect that there would be 2 primal chaos stone tablets hidden in Longao's body. Moreover, he did not explode and die. This was a miracle among miracles. Sister, the primal chaos stone tablets are the strongest weapons in the world. If we forcefully attack, once we are swallowed by the primal chaos stone tablets, we will never be able to recover. How could Bai Ling not know what her sister was talking about? But Longao's life was at stake. He could be killed by the 2 primal chaos stone tablets at any time. How could Bai Ling remain calm? Sister, you should know the power of the primal chaos stone tablets. I advise you not to act rashly. Otherwise, not only you, even he will die. Su. At this time, within Longao's dantian, 2 stone tablets suddenly shot out. It was the 5 elements primal chaos stone tablet that had been peaceful, devouring the primal chaos stone tablets. The 2 primal chaos stone tablets were as tall as 100 people. They emitted a terrifying aura. Luckily, the target of the 2 primal chaos stone tablets was Longao and not Xiling and Bai Ling, otherwise, Xiling and Bai Ling would be doomed. After all, the power of the 2 primal chaos stone tablets was there. Longao's body was covered in sweat. He closed his eyes and clenched his fists. The 2 primal chaos stone tablets did not directly start fighting. Instead, they emitted power that passed through Longao's body and continuously fought. This was the most painful part. If this continued, there was only one result, and that was that Longao would definitely die. Sister, I beg you. If you don't ask me, I have no choice. Staring at Longao in front of her, Bai Ling finally gritted her teeth. Her entire body turned into a ball of white light and shot towards the 2 chaos stone tablets. Seeing his sister shoot at the primal chaos stone tablets, Xiling jumped in fright. As if he had guessed what his sister was going to do, Xiling could only stand there anxiously. The 2 primal chaos stone tablets were too dangerous. Let alone her current strength, even if she recovered to her peak state, she wouldn't dare rashly collide with them. Legend. There were a total of 12 primal chaos stone tablets in the world. Each one of them was an incomparably powerful existence. At the same time, each one of them could destroy the heavens and the earth. Why would the primal chaos stone tablets appear in the martial heaven continent? Xiling couldn't understand. Furthermore, Longao actually had 2 primal chaos stone tablets in his body. If he hadn't seen it with his own eyes, he wouldn't have believed it even if he was beaten to death. It was too shocking. Xiling was extremely worried about his sister's safety, but he could only stand there helplessly, staring at the 2 primal chaos stone tablets. Bai Ling transformed into a streak of white light. She had already arrived at Longao's side. Looking at the pale-faced Longao, Bai Ling ignored everything and directly entered his dantian. Young Master Long, I've come to help you. Within his soul. Hearing this voice, Longao was extremely moved. He was very clear what Bai Ling's forceful actions meant. If he was unlucky, he could be killed by the 2 primal chaos stone tablets at any moment. Bai Ling, don't worry about me. Leave first. Before Longao could even finish speaking, he felt a terrifying power spread throughout his body. This was Bai Ling's power. Master, hurry and circulate the firmament devouring art and the 5 elements devouring heaven art. Longao didn't dare to hesitate at all. Because Bai Ling was willing to give up her life for him. If he missed this opportunity, not only would he be letting himself down, he would also be letting Bai Ling down. The 2 supreme martial skills were activated at the same time. The 2 powers occupied 2 sides, each taking half of the world. If Longao was alone, it would be impossible to forcefully separate the 2 primal chaos stone tablets, even with the help of the 5 elements heaven devouring art and the firmament devouring art. But now, Longao had Bai Ling's full support. Gradually, the power of the 2 primal chaos stone tablets began to separate. At this time, Longao and Bai Ling both let out a long sigh of relief. But before the 2 of them could rest, the 2 powers that had just been separated started fighting again. This time, the 2 powers attacked each other with even more terrifying power. If this continued, even Bai Ling might not be able to stop the 2 primal chaos stone tablets. Young Master Long, I'll lend you my true body. Bai Ling, you can't do that. Hearing Bai Ling's words, Longao jumped in fright. He naturally knew what Bai Ling's true body meant. If Bai Ling's true body was injured, then even a Nirvana realm expert wouldn't be able to save Bai Ling. He couldn't harm Bai Ling for himself. Longao naturally wasn't willing to accept her true body's power. Young Master Long, things have already reached this point. If you don't borrow my true body's power, then the 2 of us will die. The power of the 2 primal chaos stone tablets is too terrifying. While they are still sealed, perhaps we can forcibly separate them. But once the 2 primal chaos stone tablets attack each other and break the other's seal, at that time, not just you and me, but the entire martial heaven continent will be destroyed in an instant. Was this true or false? Longao felt that Bai Ling was exaggerating. Although he had to admit that the 2 primal chaos stone tablets were extremely powerful, he didn't really believe that they could destroy the world. Let alone the 2 primal chaos stone tablets. Even the God Diviner and the heavenly Taoes were unable to do this. Could it be that the 2 primal chaos stone tablets were above the heavenly Taoes and the God Diviner? But it had to be known. In the martial heaven continent, only the heavenly Taoes and the God Diviner had truly reached the peak of the martial path. No matter how powerful the 2 primal chaos stone tablets were, they couldn't possibly fight against the peak of the martial path. Master, Bai Ling's words are correct. If the 2 primal chaos stone tablets attack each other and break the seal, the world will be destroyed in the blink of an eye. If Bai Ling had said this, perhaps Longao wouldn't have believed it. But now, even Long Fu had said this. Longao was very clear that he had no choice but to believe it. Chapter 1035. The primal chaos stone tablets could destroy the heavens and the earth. If it really was as Bai Ling and Long Fu had said, then he absolutely could not allow the 2 primal chaos stone tablets to break their seals. Longao did not dare to be the slightest bit careless. He fully activated the heavenly devouring technique and the 5 elements heaven devouring technique. How terrifying! Longao had always thought that Bai Ling and Xiling were extremely powerful, but he never would have thought that Bai Ling's true body would be so powerful, far surpassing his understanding. Borrowing the strength of Bai Ling's true body, Longao roared loudly and forcefully separated the 2 primal chaos stone tablets. Although they were temporarily separated, Longao was very clear that the 2 primal chaos stone tablets could start fighting again at any moment. What should he do then? Long Fu, what should I do next? After a moment of silence, Long Fu suddenly said, Master, with the help of Bai Ling's true body, the 2 primal chaos stone tablets have temporarily separated. Let's think of something later. Even Long Fu had said so, Longao could only nod. Bai Ling's appearance caused Longao to let out a long sigh of relief. Chen-ph, Bai Ling, remember this. Without my permission, you are not allowed to act on your own. I understand, sister. He glanced at Bai Ling, then at Xiling. Bai Ling, thank you. He did not say any more nonsense. This time, Bai Ling had not been afraid of danger to help him. If he said that he did not dare to move, then he would be lying. Moreover, at the last moment, Bai Ling had actually used the power of her true body. Who could do such a thing? Bai Ling was too kind. Longao, why do you have 2 primal chaos stone tablets in your body? Although Xiling didn't help him this time, Longao wasn't angry at all. He didn't want to hide the truth, because it was human nature. Not only Xiling, he believed that no matter who it was, they wouldn't choose to help at that time. With their lives at stake, who would disregard their own to save an outsider? How could Xiling do something that not even the sages could do? As for the matter of the 2 chaos stone tablets, Longao actually didn't want to tell anyone about it. This was because he was very clear in his heart just what it meant to have 2 chaos stone tablets. Next, Longao briefly explained the matter of the 2 chaos stone tablets. After listening, Bai Ling and Xiling both nodded, as if they didn't have any doubts. Young Master Long, since you already know what the 2 primal chaos stone tablets mean, then the 2 primal chaos stone tablets are within your body. They can begin fighting again at any moment. If you relax for even a moment, you will. Bai Ling did not continue, but the meaning of her words was already very clear. When the 2 primal chaos stone tablets began fighting, they could be implicated at any moment. As for what Bai Ling was worried about, how could Longao not know? Primal chaos stone tablets. Xiling, who had been silent all this time, suddenly said, Longao, you must quickly resolve the 2 primal chaos stone tablets. Otherwise, you will be killed at any moment. Let me ask you now, have you already comprehended a powerful martial skill from the 2 primal chaos stone tablets? There was nothing to hide about this point. Longao told the 2 of them about the firmament devouring art and the 5 elements heaven devouring art. Of the 2 powerful martial skills, the firmament devouring art's power didn't need to be mentioned. As for the 5 elements heaven devouring art, he still hadn't fully comprehended it. However, Longao was very clear that the 5 elements heaven devouring art wasn't that simple. The 5 elements heaven devouring art was very powerful. However, the 5 elements heaven devouring art was too difficult to cultivate. It was even more difficult than the firmament devouring art. Xiling seemed to be able to guess what Longao was thinking. He thought about it. Longao, if I'm not mistaken, you've already cultivated the firmament devouring art to a small degree. Only the 5 elements heaven devouring art is still not fully cultivated, right? F***ck Longao didn't know why Xiling's guess was so accurate. Could it be that Xiling knew about the 5 elements primal chaos stone tablets and how to devour them? That's right. Longao, if you have the chance in the future, you should make a trip to the 5 elements sect. At that time, your 5 elements heaven devouring art will have a huge breakthrough. 5 elements sect. Longao wasn't a stranger to the 5 elements sect. In the martial sky continent, there were 10 factions. They were the Long family, the Pill Alliance, the Martial Artists Alliance, the Myriad Beast sect, the Heaven and Earth sect, the 5 Elements sect, the Wanzhan School, the Sword sect, the Violet Thunder sect, and the Profound Heaven sect. The 5 Elements sect, the Myriad Beast sect, and the Heaven and Earth sect were known as the 3 sects of the Martial Sky Continent. One could imagine how powerful the 5 Elements sect was. Although Xiling didn't continue, Longao could already guess why Xiling wanted him to go to the 5 Elements sect. Everyone knew. The disciples of the 5 Elements sect all cultivated the power of the 5 elements. I know. Xiling fiercely glared at Bai Ling, who was beside her, and said in a very displeased manner, Longao, this time younger sister has used her true self. The strength that she had recovered previously has been for naught. Longao also looked at Bai Ling. He didn't say anything. Things had already reached this point. He didn't know what to say. Sister. Waving his hand, Xiling said coldly, you don't have to pay for it. You're on your own now. Xiling turned into a purple stream of air and entered the god-punishing sword. Behind the mountain peak, only Longao and Bai Ling were left. They looked at each other. He shuddered. Could it be that he was hallucinating? For a moment, he thought he saw Bai Ling looking at him with eyes full of love. That kind of selfless love. What was going on? Impossible. Definitely impossible. How could Bai Ling like him? It must be a hallucination. Bai Ling, thank you so much. I will think of all kinds of ways to help you recover to your peak. Nodding, Bai Ling only told him to be careful. Then she turned into a ball of white light and returned to the god-punishing sword. Arriving at the peak of the mountain, Longao stood alone at the peak of the mountain, letting the breeze blow past him. In that moment of life and death, Longao seemed to understand something. But he couldn't explain it clearly. The 2 chaos tablets, the so-called devouring chaos tablet and the 5 elements chaos tablet, had always been a big problem in his body. Because he didn't know when the 2 chaos tablets would continue to fight. Just as Xiling had said, once the 2 chaos tablets began to fight, they would break the other's seal. At that time, he would definitely be caught in the crossfire and killed by the aura released by the 2 chaos tablets. What should he do? Separating the 2 chaos tablets was only temporary. Longao was very clear that he had to quickly think of a way to deal with the 2 chaos tablets. Otherwise, the consequences would be unthinkable. Master, I've already thought about the 2 chaos tablets. If you want to completely deal with them, there is only one way. What way? Pleasantly surprised, Longao impatiently asked. Because right now, the most important thing to do was to think of a way to prevent the 2 chaos tablets from continuing to fight. Author's note, the 3rd chapter has been delivered. Brothers who still have a monthly ticket or a recommendation ticket, you can buy a few. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories,